The anime begins by introducing us to the protagonist named Nami, who is a 20-year-old college student who doesn't usually go out because he is an aku, and in that it is revealed to us that he still lives, that his parents, they give him an allowance so he doesn't have to look for a job. And after this presentation we see how Nami decides to visit a library so he can read light novels, but when he tries to grab one of these he accidentally knocks over several books, so Nami decides to pick up one of the books that he knocked down on the floor, which is titled The Four Sacred Weapons, and when interested in the title, Nami decides to open it to read it, and there he realizes that the story of the book talks about 4 heroes which come from another world, and each one has a sacred weapon, being a sword, a spear, a bow, and a shield respectively, and in that it is revealed to us that these are in charge of saving the world from the enemy waves. And after this Nami decides to continue reading the book, but when he tries to read the shield hero's information, he notices that it is empty, and at that moment the book begins to shine, and their Nami is transported to a kingdom called Melamar within a fantasy world, where he is received by several priests which reveal that they have summoned him along with 3 other boys to save their kingdom, so their Nami notices that he and the others are the 4 heroes of the sacred weapons, being him the hero of the shield, and there we see how the priests ask him for help because their world is in danger, to which the other heroes respond by saying that they are willing to listen to them. However, they do not plan to work for free, so the priests tell the boys that they will soon have a meeting with the king so that they can negotiate with him, what the boys accept, and after a few hours they meet with the king of Melmark called Alt, which asks the legendary heroes to come forward, and in that we see that the sword hero is called Rin, the one with the spear is a boy named Matoya, and the one with the bow is called Itsuki. And after the presentation of these, Nami tries to introduce himself, however Alt ignores it, which makes Nami realize that the shield hero is not that important, and after this Alt tells them about an apocalyptic prophecy of this new world which says that several waves of destruction will arrive, so if they fail to avoid these waves, the world will come to an end. And then Alt tells the kids about the hourglasses from the Age of Dragons which are found in each kingdom and announce when the waves will arrive, and after this Alt comments that the first wave arrived in this kingdom, and there the soldiers of the kingdom managed to resist it, but knowing that the second and third will be worse, they decided to invoke the heroes, and there mentions that the next wave will be in less than a month, this being the reason why the heroes must become stronger by then. And with that the boys decide to agree to help them in exchange for a great reward, to which the king accepts, and then he asks the heroes to check their stats, and in doing so the boys realize that this world is like a video game, so they must level up to become stronger, and that the boys decide to form a team. However, they are stopped by Alt's advisor, which tells them that these must become strong separately since legendary weapons repel each other, so if they fight together a negative reaction occurs immediately, which means that traveling together prevents them from growing optimally. And after this the counselor asks the kids to rest for the rest of the day so that you can prepare to start your adventure tomorrow, and then at night we see how the heroes gather in a room to talk, and there each one mentions that this world is similar to a video game that only they know, which makes everyone confused, and after talking for a while they realize that they all come from a different world, so it is revealed to us that each one comes from a different Japan, and in that Nami notices that he is at a disadvantage since the other heroes know a game similar to this world unlike him, and there the boys mention that the shield hero is the most useless of all since this one has the worst legendary weapon, which makes Nami upset, but then he decides to calm down and get good travel companions, and after this Nami is motivated because his adventure will soon begin, and then the next day the boys meet with Alt, who has gathered his best warriors to join each hero's team, so in that each warrior begins to choose a hero, and after a while Nami realizes that no one wants to be on his team since rumors are spreading that he knows nothing about this new world, this being the reason why no one trusts their abilities, so there the heroes find out that their conversation last night was exposed, and then Nami begins to get upset because he won't be able to level up on his own, but at that moment a girl from Matoya's group named Main shows up, and there she decides to team up with Nami, which makes Nami surprised, and then after this Alt decides to give each hero money for their travels, and he decides to give Nami more than the rest because he doesn't have such a big team, and after this we see how the heroes begin their journey, so the others say goodbye to Nami and wish him good luck, and after this Main decides to show the capital to Nami so that he can become familiar with this new world, and there Nami decides to go to a weapons and equipment store, so Main takes him to a guy named Herard, which is a blacksmith who runs a weapons and equipment store, and there he recognizes Nami as the hero of the shield, so he tells Nami that he has had bad luck. However, Nami decides not to let his comment affect him, and there he asks Ard to show him a weapon that he can use, so Ard shows him several swords made of different minerals, but when Nami tries to grab a sword it immediately repels him, and there Nami realizes that he can only use his shield as a weapon, so he must fight alone using his shield, and at that Herard asks Nami if he can take it off, to which Nami responds by telling that he can only move it around. However, he is unable to remove the shield from his body, so after this Nami decides to buy only one adventurer's outfit, and then Main tells him that It's time to level up, so they both go to the outskirts of the capital to gain experience, and once outside, Nami finds some low-level monsters known as balloons which attack him without hesitation. However, they are not able to hurt Nami thanks to their shields, so Nami takes advantage of this to take his time and defeat them with his fists, and after several hours, Nami uses one of his shield's abilities with which he absorbs the balloons he defeated to obtain new abilities, and then Main tells Nami that they should buy equipment for her since this way they could fight stronger monsters, to which Nami accepts, so they return to Erhard's store, and there Nami begins to negotiate with him in order to get a discount on your purchase, which makes Ard surprised by Naofumi's ability. And after this we see how Main decides to buy some quite expensive equipment, and there she convinced Nami to buy them because they will be able to recover that money, so Nami decides to pay for everything, and after this Nami asks Erhard where he can sell the remains of balloons, to which Erhard tells him about a monster materials store, so Nami manages to recover a little of his lost money. And then at night he decides to have dinner with Main, and there they begin to organize their plans for tomorrow, and after this Main proposes a toast to Nami. However, Nami decides to reject it since he doesn't drink alcohol, and Main tries to convince him, but Nami rejects his proposal again, and upon hearing his response, Main tells him that he really is a hero, and there she reveals that in Mel remark women are superior to men, so men do not usually reject drinks offered by women, which makes Nami surprised, and after this Nami decides to go to sleep, but before leaving he thanks Main for deciding to be part of his team, and then the next day Nami prepares to go out and level up. However, he notices that his money and armor are missing, so Nami starts looking for him everywhere, and then he realizes that everything was stolen from him, so Nami decides to look for Main to warn him about this, but then several soldiers from the castle appear in front of Nami, and there they tell him that the king needs to talk to him, so he is urgently taken to the castle where he meets Main and the other heroes, and in that Main mentions that Nami drank too much last night, and after this he tried to abuse her, so she escaped and asked Matoya for help. And upon hearing this Nami is amazed because he does not understand anything, and in that Nami tries to tell everyone that it is a misunderstanding. However, Alt orders him to remain silent, and there we see how Main secretly mocks Nami, which causes him to get angry knowing that she only used and deceived him, and there Nami asks the king to return him to his world and summon a new hero, to which Ul responds by telling him that that is not possible since they can only summon another hero if the current 4 die, so these can only return if they stop all the waves of destruction, and there he mentions that sexually abusing a woman is punishable by death. However, being a hero, Nami cannot receive this punishment since the next wave will soon come, so his punishment will be that everyone in the kingdom knows of his crime, so that his reputation is tarnished and everyone hates him, so at that point Nami decides to take care of the waves in his own way, and there he decides to retire from his castle after having lost everything because of Main, and once outside all the citizens begin to view him with contempt, and in that Naofumi is stopped by Ard, who tries to hit Nami for what he supposedly did to Main, but upon seeing his look Ard realizes that Nami is not guilty, so he decides to help him by giving him a new outfit, and there Nami thanks him and tells him that he will pay him back at some point, and after this Nami goes to the outskirts of the capital where he begins to fight against several balloons, and after many hours Nami manages to rise to level 2, and there Nami decides to take with him several live balloons since having a bad reputation merchant try to scam you, so he begins to threaten them using balloons in order to have the treatment of a normal person, and then Nami manages to earn a little money with which he pays her hard, and after a few days Nami finds some special plants, so he decides to absorb them with his shield, which allows him to gain a new ability and better understand his powers, and there he manages to improve the quality of the plants he touches due to his new power, so in that he sells the plants at a good price after using his gathering skill. So after this Naif decides to have dinner in a tavern. However, he realizes that food has no taste for him since he was betrayed, and then we see how 3 adventurers interrupt their dinner, and there they decide to follow Nami outside the tavern to try to steal his money, so Nami uses the balloons and his shield to defend himself, and after chasing them away Nami notices that he lacks offensive force, which makes it alter, but then a guy named Bacchus appears in front of Nami, and there he makes a proposal to Nami when he notices that he needs a partner, so he asks Nami to accompany him to his warehouse where he reveals that he is a slave trader, and there he tells him that these have a curse which prevents them from disobeying their master's orders, so upon hearing this Nami becomes interested in Bolus's proposal, and there he decides to show the slaves, revealing in the process that some of them are demi-humans, which are beings half human half beasts, and their Bacchus recommends a slave to Nami, which is a powerful level 75 beast, so upon seeing her Nami asks her how much it costs, to which Bacchus responds by telling him that it costs 15 gold coins, which makes Nami ask him why he showed him a slave he can't pay, and their Bacchus tells him that he thinks he will become a frequent customer, so he wants Nami to see his best product to train his eyesight, and after this Boaz asks Nami what kind of slave he wants, to which Nami responds by telling him that he wants a cheap and obedient one, so at that Boaz tells him that then he will have to buy a demium, but there Boaz mentions that these do not specialize in combat, so Nami must train him, and in that Nami finds a little slave named Raylia who is physically and mentally ill, so Boaz believes that she will not last long alive, and there Nami decides to buy Rayfia, which makes Boaz surprised, and after this we see how he decides to start the ritual in order to officially return to Rayfia, now Fumi's slave, and after doing so he tells her that now she will not be able to disobey him, and there Nami notices how now Rayfia has become his companion, which will allow you to share your experience with her when they fight together, and after this Nami decides to take Rayfia with him, and then he visits Ard, whom he asks to sell him a weapon and new clothes for Rayfia, and after this Nami asks her to stab one of his balloons, which causes Rayfia to get scared and not want to do it, but then her slave seal activates and begins to make her suffer, so Rayfia is forced to attack the balloon until it is destroyed, causing both to gain experience in the process, and then Nami tells her that she will fight monsters from now on since he also needs to recover the money he invested when buying it, and after this Nami and Rayfia leave her a hard store, and once outside he notices that Rayfia is very hungry, so he decides to take her to a restaurant where he asks for the cheapest dish for himself, and Rayfia asks for a more expensive dish, which makes Rayfia surprised to see everything he can eat, and after this they both go out to level up fighting several balloons, so their Nami manages to gain experience faster than before, and then they decide to rest, and their Nami notices that he has gained the ability to combine different ingredients, and that he thinks it could be useful, and at that moment Rayfia decides to ask Nami who he is, to which Nami responds by telling him that he is the hero of the shield, and upon hearing this Rayfia begins to remember her parents, which told them that the shield heroes were kind and valued demi-humans, so Rayfia is happy to know that she met the shield hero in person, and after this Nami gives him a medicine that he has just created with his skill in order to cure Rayfia of her illness, and after this we see how Raylia is sleeping, but then she begins to remember her past, where we see how Rayfia witnesses the first wave of destruction, so she begins to flee from the monsters with her parents. However, they are cornered by a large monster, so that the parents decide to sacrifice themselves in order to save Raylia, and after dreaming this Rayfia wakes up completely upset, which causes Nami to calm her down by telling her that she is now safe, and then the next day Nami sells the medicine he prepared the day before, so this one manages to make some money, and after this Nami meets with Rayfia, which is watching some children playing with a ball, so he asks her if she wants one, to which Rayfia responds by saying no. However, Nami realizes that she is lying, so he buys her a ball, and there he tells her that he can play with her when they finish working for which Rayfia is happy, and then at night Nami and Rayfia go to an inn to sleep in a room, and there he is forced to threaten the owner with one of his balloons in order to be accepted with Raptalia, and then we see how both begin to spend the days gaining experience, and there they meet a rabbit which tries to attack Rayfia, so Nami intervenes to stop him, and there he asks Rayfia to stab the rabbit with his dagger, which makes her scared because she is afraid of blood, and by not obeying Nami, Rayfia begins to feel pain from her seal, and then Nami tells her that he won't be able to take care of her if she can't fight, since Nami needs someone else to fight for him, and upon hearing this Rayfia decides to stand up again, and there she stabs the rabbit while telling Nami that she will fight for him, since she does not want Nami to abandon her, and after this Nami decides to visit Herard to buy Rayfia a sword because Nami wants to visit a new town, so after this they both visit the neighboring town called Riot, where he sells rabbit fur for 2 silver coins, and there Nami asks the seller for a place to make money easily, and upon hearing this he tells her about a mine that contains valuable minerals. However, a dangerous monster from the first wave has been living there, this being the reason why no one has entered the mine again, so there Nami decides to explore it to collect minerals, but before that Nami begins to experiment with his new abilities, with which he manages to create a shield of ropes and one of air, so there he decides to use them to survive the mine, and after this he enters the mine with Raylia, and once inside Nami manages to collect several valuable stones, so he is happy because he will be able to sell it at a high price, but in that moment he observes how Rayfia is paralyzed with fear, and at that moment we see how a monster appears which is similar to the monster that killed Rhea's parents, so Rayfia starts screaming out of fear, and there Nami decides to hold her to escape from the monster, and in that Rayfia talks to Nami about his past, which makes Nami understand why she is so scared, but then Nami tells Raylia that she must defeat the monster, since he must get stronger in order to stop the waves and prevent other children from experiencing what she experienced, and at that moment Nami decides to stop the monster using his body, and by doing so he asks Rayfia to take advantage of the opportunity to kill him. However, Rafia is paralyzed with fear, so she begins to suffer from the curse of being a slave, but seeing that she is very terrified, Nami decides to give up, so Nami asks him to flee while he stops the monster, and the Rafia realizes that if she runs away, Nami will die like his parents, and in that she begins to remember her days with Nami, which makes her regain her will to fight, so their Rafia attacks the monster with his sword, and in that Nami uses his air shield to stop the monster, which allows Rafia to cause a wound to the monster, with which she eliminates it, so there they manage to gain a lot of experience. And after this, Rafia hugs Nami while crying since she feels relieved to see that Nami is still alive, and a week after this event we see how Nami heads to the field with Rafia in order to continue raising the level, and in that we see how he traps a monster in a shield prison, which allows Rafia to eliminate the enemy easily, and there it is revealed to us that Raylia has grown a lot in a short time, which has caused his personality to change as well. And after this we see how Nami and Rafia visit Herard, who is asked to create armor for Nami since his current clothing is not capable of protecting him from all the attacks he receives, so Ard recommends one of his best armors. However, Nami notes that it is very heavy, so he asks Ard to make him a suit of armor, and there Ard mentions that he will have it ready for tomorrow. And after this, Nami and Rafia go to dinner at a tavern where Nami asks for a children's dish for Rafia, but then Rafia gets angry while telling her that she is no longer a girl, so there she orders the same dish as Naa Fumi's. And then the next day we see how Nami receives the armor made by Ard, which is known as Armor of the Savages, and in that Arief Alia is amazed to see how great Nami looks, and then we see how several soldiers begin to patrol the entire area, since these are preparing for the arrival of the next wave of destruction, and their Nami mentions that he could make a plan if he knew when the wave would come, and upon hearing this, Ard tells him about the Church of the Kingdom, which has the hourglass that announces the arrival of the wave, and there he reveals that at that moment the heroes and their allies will be transported in order to be present in the wave. And after hearing this, Nami decides to visit the hourglass, and once there he notices how the watch reacts to Naofumi's shield, which causes Nami to be able to observe the time left for the next wave, and in that we see how Matoya appears with his allies, and when he sees that Main is there, Nami gets upset, so their Nami decides to leave the site, but before leaving, Matcha asks Rafia if she has heard the rumors about Nami, which makes her look confused. However, Nami decides to take Rafia with her, and then they meet Run and Ituki, those who ask him not to get in the way during the wave, and later at night Rafia asks Nami if something happened between him and the other heroes, to which he responds by telling her that he doesn't need to know that, so Rafia decides not to continue putting pressure on him. And then the next day we see how the warriors prepare for the wave, and there Rafia decides to talk with Nami, to whom he tells that he is glad to have met him since he has done a lot for her, this being the reason why she is very grateful, and there Rafia tells Nami that she will be his sword, so she will follow him anywhere. And after this we see how the time comes which causes the wave of destruction to arrive in the kingdom, so with that the heroes and their allies are transported to the battle zone, where they observe how various monsters begin to appear, so Nami decides to go defeat them. However, Rafia realizes that the Riot village is under attack, so Nami decides to go to Riot to protect the villagers with Rafia, and once there Nami orders Rafia to evacuate the villagers since he will be in charge of distracting the monsters in the area, and then Nami begins to defend several villagers while attracting monsters, and then he decides to head towards a big tower which begins to climb by means of a ladder, and once at the top Nami begins to ring a bell in order to attract the attention of all the monsters, so they begin to climb the tower to kill Nami, and their Nami throws gasoline all over the tower and then start a fire, so after this Nami escapes from the tower using his rope shield, which allows you to defeat several monsters, and in that we see how the villagers regain their will to fight when they see Nami, so they try to help him, but then we see how a huge monster appears which causes Nami to be forced to intervene to stop him and protect the villagers, and their Nami asks the villagers to move back since they will not be able to defeat the monsters, and in that we see how Rafia appears to help Nami, so they begin to defeat all the enemies by fighting as a team, and at that moment we see how several of the king's knights appear to help Nami, and meanwhile the other heroes fight against the strongest monster of the wave, whom they manage to defeat after fighting together, which causes the wave to end. And after this we see how all the villagers begin to thank Nami, because without his help they would not have survived, and after this Rafia mentions that now others will not have to go through what she went through, to which Nami responds by saying yes, so he congratulates her for her work during the wave, which makes Rafia start to cry with joy. And then at night we see how the king organizes a great feast for the four heroes, where we see how Nami attends only to receive his reward. However, Rafia appears in front of him to encourage him to try the party food, which makes Nami not feel alone, but at that moment Matoya appears and challenges Nami to a duel, since he heard the rumors that Rafia is his slave, this being the reason why Matoya wants to free her. And upon hearing this, Nami mentions that in this world slavery is allowed, so he decides to reject his duel, and their Matcha tells him that a hero should not have slaves, this being the reason why he insists on challenging him, so Nami to leave the party. but then he is stopped by the kingdom soldiers on the orders of Alt, which decides to carry out the duel between the two heroes, and their Rafia tries to tell them that this duel is not necessary, but then she is stopped by the soldiers with the excuse that she does not know what she is saying, so their Nami is forced to accept the duel to recover Rafia, and then we see how he and Matcha enter the arena, and then Matoya attacks Nami using various abilities of his spear. However, Nami manages to withstand their attacks and counterattack using the balloons, which begin to hurt Matoya, and after this Nami uses his new various shield abilities with which he manages to pressure Matoya, so Nami gets the advantage of the battle. But then he receives a surprise attack from Main, which allows Matoya to recover and deal a serious blow to Nami, thus managing to win the duel. So Nami mentions that Main has interfered in the fight, however no one decides to believe him, so Alt removes the slavery curse from Rafia, and there it is revealed to us that is actually the daughter of King Alt, this being the reason why Alt does everything to please her, which makes Nami feel desperate. But at that moment Ren and Itsuki interrupt Matoya's celebration, and there they revealed that they saw Main's actions, which were overlooked thanks to Alt, but with the intervention of Ran and Itsuki, it is demonstrated that Matcha lost the duel, which allows Rafia to return to Nami. To those who say that they will always be their ally, they never plan to leave them, so their Nami is happy to have someone to trust. And then the next day Rafia delivers a meal to Nami, which he prepared with the leftover food from yesterday's party, and upon tasting it Nami realizes that his taste for food has returned, which makes him happy. And after this we see how the heroes are gathered in front of Alt, which offers rewards to all heroes except Nami, so Itsuki and Ren decide to defend Nami again since he saved the Ryut people during the wave, so Alt is forced to give Nami the minimum reward, and after this Nami and Rafia go with Baka's since Rafia wishes to have the curse again as a slave, to which Nami tells him that it is no longer necessary. However, Rafia mentions that she wants to show him her loyalty that way, and after this Baka's advises Nami to buy an egg from a fall, which is a race of creatures that load transports in the city, and their Baka's mentions that if he's lucky, he might get a dragon from one of the eggs, so their Nami decides to buy an egg from Fall, and after this he visits the witch of the capital, which thanks him for saving his grandson and Riot, so she gives him a grimoire so that Nami and Rafia can learn magic in this world, and after this the boys decide to spend the night in Root, and then the next day we watch as Fal's egg hatches, and in that a Folial is born whom Nami decides to name as Fo, so Nami begins to take care of her for 2 days, and after this we see how Fo has grown a lot in a short time, which makes Nami and Rafia amazed, but in that we see how Mei and Matoya appear in Riot, and there she announces that now this town belongs to Matoya by order of the king, this being the reason why everyone will have to pay very expensive taxes, which makes the villagers angry as they disagree with this, so Main decides to order to eliminate those who oppose him, but at that moment royal messengers appear and bring a message to Main, and after reading it Main decides to challenge Nami to a duel for control of Riot, which consists of a 3-lap race around the town, to which Nami rejects the proposal, but after receiving so much insist from the villagers he decides to accept, so Nami makes a race riding Foe against Matoya and his dragon, and in that we see how several soldiers of the kingdom cheat so that Nami loses the race. However, he manages to overcome all obstacles, which allows you to reach the goal first, and there Nami realizes that Foe has become even bigger, so he is amazed, and after this the governor of Ryu gives Nami a carriage and a license, with which you can enter several towns and cities without paying anything, and then Nami decides to continue with his journey, but the next day we see how Foe has turned into a little girl, and after this it is revealed to us that Foe is an aspiring queen of the fall, this being the reason why she is special among her species, and then we see how Nami visits Ard, to whom he tells that he needs special clothes for Foe since she rips her clothes every time she transforms, so her heart recommends that they go see the seamstress in the capital, but once there she tells them that they need a magic thread, which is creating using a magic stone that is very difficult to find, so Nami decides to trade products in different towns in the meantime, and along the way the boys meet a man in trouble since he must bring medicine to his people, so their Nami tells him that he will help him if he gives him something in return, and in that Nami decides to take the man using Foe, which allows them to reach the nearby town in a short time, and once there Nami gives the medicine to the man's mother, causing her to feel much better, for which the Lord thanks you, and there he gives him a bag full of vegetables as payment for helping him, so at that point Nami realizes that he can use Foe to his advantage since they could transport people and loads in emergency situations, so after this we see how the boys start to work taking trips, which allows them to save money, and then we see how they transport a merchant named Hick, who reveals to them that Nami has become known as the Saint of the Bird God since he is in charge of healing the sick in a carriage pulled by Foe, so Nami is surprised to hear this, and then Rafia announces to Noom that several bandits are blocking the way, and there they reveal that they want to kidnap Hick, Aurelia, and Foe decide to defeat them using magic, and after this Nami threatens to kill them all, which causes the bandits to begin begging for their lives, and there Nami decides to spare the lives of the bandits with one condition, which consists of giving them everything they have stolen to use it to your advantage. and then Hick decides to pay Nami by offering him all his knowledge and contacts, which allows Nami to grow as a merchant and learn about jewelry. And after this, Nami manages to receive information about the stone that makes magical thread, so he decides to go to the mine where the stone is located together with the witch, and once there they encounter a huge Chima which they manage to defeat by working as a team, and there they manage to collect the special stone which allows them to get the magic thread to make Fo's clothes, for which Fo thanks Nami. And after this the boys travel to a town in the south, since these must transport a special product in order to eliminate some plants that end throughout the town, and once in the town they are received by the governor, who tells them that the plants have negatively affected the people since these are causing illness in the villagers, so they ask Nami for help as a saint of the bird god, and then Nami begins to cure the villagers using the special product and his magic, so everyone thanks him. But before the boys leave, the governor stops them, and there they ask him to save his people from the plants, and in that they reveal that before they were starving, Somya appeared with a special seed weeks ago, which grew to provide enough food for all the villagers. However, the seed grew so much that it spread throughout the town, reaching the point of affecting the villagers, and their Nami decides to solve Matoya's mistake in exchange for a reward. And once outside the town, the boys begin to fight various plant monsters, and after this they manage to find the seed, so the boys start fighting together to defeat her, and in that Nami uses the product along with the power of his shield, which allows him to destroy the threat of the town. And after this Nami manages to modify the seed. This allows it to create fruits for the people without it being a danger in the future, for which everyone thanks Nami. And then Nami meets with Hick in order to sell part of the fruits and seeds that he was able to collect, which allows you to benefit after this deal. And after this Nami visits a city of hot springs in order to transport a load there, and after delivering a load the boys decide to take a bath in the hot springs. And their Rafia begins to feel jealous of Fo since she has become very close to Nami. And then Rafia decides to look for a special mineral on his own in order to give it to Nami as a gift, but once on the outskirts of town she meets Fo, which is looking for an egg to give to Nami. So then they both begin to walk through a mountain until they find what they are looking for. However, they encounter an aggressive monster which destroys the objects that Rafia and Fo were looking for, so they get angry and decide to hunt him down, and once back in town they both decide to sell the monster in order to buy a metal tool for Nami. So he thanks them both for the gift, and after this we see how the boys continue with their journey throughout the kingdom, and then they meet a man with his son to those who decide to give food when they see that they are in poor condition, and there he tells them that they should not go to the town that is in front of them, because if they do, they could die from a serious illness which comes from an epidemic that has recently appeared in the town. And in that Nami decides to visit that town when he is interested in the epidemic, and once there they are greeted by a villager who is amazed to see that Nami is the healer that everyone talks about, so he decides to take Nami to the town doctor, who is happy to see that Nami has come with new medicine, since what the doctor believes is not enough to save them all. And there Nami decides to try his medicine while using part of his magic with the grimoire, which makes one of the sick feel much better, so Nami gives the medicine to the rest of the sick, and after this Nami receives 50 silver coins from the people, this being all the money they had left, so Nami decides to accept them, and after this he asks the doctor if they don't plan to do anything for their people, since Nami knows that the villagers will get sick again soon, to which the nurse responds by telling him that he already knows, however they can't do anything about it. And there she mentions that the cause of the epidemic is due to a mountain dragon which was killed by the sword hero Rin a month ago, and after this the dragon's corpse rotted and became toxic, which caused the air to become poisonous, and it reached the town, so Nami realizes that the epidemic is due to Ren's mistake, and their Rafia asks them why they don't do anything if they know the cause of the disease. To which the nurse responds by saying that more dangerous monsters live on the mountain, which makes it impossible for any villager to enter the mountain, and after this she reveals that the dragon's poison changed the ecosystem of the area, this being the reason why the mountain has now become unknown to everyone, and their Nami asks the doctors if they have already notified the government of this, to which the doctor responds by saying yes, so these will soon send medicine to the people, and their Nami asks them to cancel that order since he will be in charge of saving the town on his own in exchange for receiving a large payment, which is 500 silver coins, so the doctor is surprised to hear this, but then Nami tells her that she will receive what they plan to pay the government, and after this the boys enter the mountain to look for the dragon, and after a while they encounter several monsters blocking the way, so Nami decides to cover Fo with his protective magic so that she can pass through the monsters so as not to fight them. So after this the boys manage to advance, and their Nami tells Rafia that she should stay behind since she's starting to feel sick from the toxic air. However, Rafia decides to continue with Nami, and then they find the corpse of the dragon, so the boys decide to clean the place, but at that moment the dragon begins to regenerate, and there the boys realize that he has woken up as a zombie dragon, so Nami tells Raylia that they should go back, but then Fo appears and kicks the dragon causing great damage, and there she reveals that she hates dragons very much, and that the dragon shoots its poisonous breath, so Nami tries to protect the girls with his shield. However, the poison begins to affect Rafia as it passes through Naofumi's defense, so Nami begins to wonder if he should retire or continue fighting, but their foe gets angry and tries to fight the dragon, and at that moment we see how the dragon devours foe, which causes Nami to remember the moments he spent with her, and then Nami gets angry when he thinks that foe has died, so this one unlocks a shield known as the Rage Shield, which gives him great power. However, Nami loses control, so he starts attacking the dragon with all his fury, which causes him to receive a lot of damage from the fire of the Rage Shield, and seeing him in that state, Rafia begins to worry about Nami, so she decides to stop him, which causes Nami to regain consciousness. But then he notices how Rafia is in poor condition, so there Nami begins to use his magic to heal her, and in that the dragon tries to attack Nami, so he defends himself with his shield, and there he realizes that without the Shield of Rage, he will not be able to defeat the monster. However, he begins to doubt when he knows that he could lose control again, so Nami wonders what he should do, but at that moment we see how the dragon falls defeated, and there it is revealed to us that foe was in charge of defeating him from within, since she realized that the zombie dragon's core was a purple crystal, so foe decided to eat it. And after this, Nami and foe decide to get rid of the dragon, which makes the air in the area stop being toxic, and the town is saved. And back in town, the doctor gives the reward to Nami, to which she responds by asking him to take it as payment to cure Rafia. However, the doctor mentions that Rafia has a powerful curse, so Nami must visit a church in a big city in order to obtain high-quality sacred water to cure it, so Nami decides to accept the doctor's reward, and after this Nami meets with Rafia and foe, and there the latter gives him a piece of the crystal that was inside the dragon, so he decides to make his shield absorb him, which causes him to receive a skill that he cannot yet use due to his low level, so Nami wonders what this ability is about. And then the next day we see how the boys come from carrying out an assignment, and there Nami tells Rafia that tomorrow they will return to the capital in order to get the sacred water to cure it, and after this the boys meet a girl named Melty, which is excited to see foe, so foe starts playing with Melty, so Nami and Rafia decide to go ahead and go to town, and then at night we see how foe returns to Melty, which asks Nami to take her to the capital since she separated from her escort because she was playing with the folial in the area, and there Nami decides to accept, since knowing that Melty belongs to royalty, he will be able to collect a great reward. So after this we see how the boys begin to travel back to the capital, and once there MTY thanks Nami, and there he sends foe to accompany Melty and collect the reward, since Nami plans to visit the church with Rafia, and once at the entrance to the church Nami notices that it only honors 3 heroes, so there he realizes that he has been left out again, but he still decides to enter the church, where he is received by the Archbishop, who congratulates him for the duel he had against Matoya. However, Nami ignores him and asks for high-quality sacred water, and there he pays a gold coin for it, and after this the boys decide to leave the church, but then a young soldier named Naps looking for Nami, and upon witnessing this Nami decides to flee with Rafia, since he considers that he is being wanted for having done something bad, so Nami separates from Rafia, so that she is safe, but once alone Nami is attacked by Matoya, who is upset with Nami, and there he asks him to free foe since he thinks she is one of his slaves, and in that we see how Matoya's attacks cause great damage to the city. So there we see how it appears and asks Matoya to stop, and in that Main intervenes and declares the authority for Matoya and Nami to fight since she wants to get her way. However, Melty appears mentioning that she does not accept his order, and in that it is revealed to us that Melty is Main's younger sister and the heir to the throne, so everyone is forced to obey his orders, and after this Matoya meets foe, whoever asks to stay away from Nami. However, foe shows him his true form and kicks him, and after this we see how Melty meets alone with Nami and the others, and there she tries to talk to him. However, Nami tells her that he has nothing to talk to her about, so he asks him to leave, since Nami does not trust royal people, and their Melty tries to ask Nami to listen to her. But then several of Melty's bodyguards appear, and there they tell her that King Alt is calling her, so upon hearing this Melty is forced to retreat, so she says goodbye to foe, and there the girls ask Nami why he didn't want to talk to her, but he ignores the question, and in that Nami asks foe not to meet with Melty again, which makes foe not understand Naofumi's actions, so at that point she gets sad and decides to go out for air, and there Nami begins to remember the bad things that royalty has done to him, which makes him mention that they can't trust them, and after a while we see how foe enters her hard store again, and there she tells Nami that she has a visitor, so in that we see how it appears with other soldiers, and upon seeing him Nami asks him what he wants from him, to which he responds by asking him to allow them to fight him in the next wave, since they were amazed to see how Nami fought in the previous battle, and there Nami tells them that if they want to fight in the wave. They don't need to join him, however, mentions that they want to fight at his side since all the soldiers present come from riot, so Nami saved his families during the first wave, this being the reason why they want to thank him for saving their people. And at that, Nami decides to ask them for 150 silver coins, because if you give him that amount he will accept you into his group. So and the others are amazed, but still they decide to go and collect the 150 silver coins, and after this Nami decides to improve his armor with Ard, but then he notices that a star has appeared when he reaches level 40, so their Ard explains that at level 40 he must upgrade his class, because if you don't do it you won't be able to level up as you have reached the growth limit, and their Ard tells him that class promotion takes place in the hourglass of the church, so the boys decide to go there, and along the way Nami asks Rafia what class upgrade she wants to which. Rafia responds by telling her that he can choose the one he wants for her, but then Nami tells her that she must decide her potential for herself, because when the waves end he will return to his world, this being the reason why Rafia must choose a class that allows her to live alone. And upon hearing this, Rafia begins to worry since she does not want Nami to leave her world, and then we see how the boys reach the hourglass, and there they find out that they must pay 15 gold coins for each class upgrade, so the boys are surprised to hear this, but still Nami decides to pay for the class upgrade, so he asks Rafia to go up class first, and there he delivers the 15 gold coins, but at that moment they are stopped by a nun, which mentions that the Shield Heroes group is prohibited from classing up since this was declared by the king himself. Son Ami is forced to retire with his money, and after this he visits Bacchus, who asks if there is any way to upgrade since Nami remembers that Bacchus has a level 75 slave, to which Bacchus responds by telling him that he cannot help him, but then he tells her that she can upgrade her class in the hourglass of another kingdom, and their Bacchus recommends 3 kingdoms to raise your class. However, it would take a long time to reach any of them, which makes the trip impossible since the third wave will soon come, so Nami decides to discard this idea for now and there. Bacchus recommends some flying dragon claws for foe, which will increase your strength during combat, so Nami decides to buy them, and after this Nami takes an order from BAS to test foe's claws, so the boys are going to marry a monster that is in the sewers, and once there they begin to fight together, and at that moment we see how foe defeats the monster with his new team, so she is happy, and then at night Nami puts the bandages with holy water on Rafia so that she can be cured of the dragon's curse as quickly as possible, and there Rafia asks Nami if she can accompany him to his world when everything is over, which makes Nami surprised, but before Rafia can say anything else, Foe interrupts the conversation, so there Nami decides to end the talk, and after this we see how the boys travel to a northern town to carry out an order, and once there they meet some villagers in poor condition, and there they reveal that Atuki caused a revolution with a group of rebels since there was a corrupt governor in the town. However, the group of rebels took control, which caused the situation of the town to worsen, so Nami decides to help them, and after this he returns to the capital with the girls, where they meet Ren and Itsuki, which mention that someone else collected their rewards for their missions, so Nami starts laughing at them, and their Itsuki and Ren decide to confront Nami, and at that moment Nami tells them about the group of rebels and the dragon's corpse, so that they realize that because of them many people have died. However, Atuki decides not to believe Nami, so he decides to leave the tavern, and after this Nami receives a new armor from her Hard, which has a zombie dragon core on its chest, and then we see how and the others appear with the 150 silver coins, so they decide to give them to Nami. However, Nami asks them to use that money to buy better equipment, and there he accepts them on his team, which makes Ake and the others happy, but then he tells them that if they betray him, they will pay dearly, what the boys accept, and after this we see how the boys prepare for the next wave, so their Nami gives a new accessory to Rafia and Foe, which are responsible for increasing your study statistics, and after this the boys are transported to the wave area, where we see how they begin to fight against the monsters around them, and once their Nami meets the old woman he cured some time ago, which reveals to be a retired adventurer, so she manages to defeat several monsters with her fists easily, so Nami is surprised to see how strong the old woman is, and there she tells him that she will take care of the monsters in the area with and the others, so Nami decides to go with the other heroes to defeat the boss of the wave, and in that he finds a huge floating ship where the other heroes are fighting against the strongest monsters. However, in that we see how Ren and Matoya do not know how to fight as a team, so Nami decides to intervene to tell them that they must fight together, because if they don't they won't be able to survive the wave, and then Nami notices that the monsters around him have strange shadows, so he orders Rafia to use her light magic, to which she accepts, and in that we see how Nami discovers that weakness is found in his shadows, so everyone starts attacking them, which allows them to defeat all the monsters, but then we see how the boss of the wave called Soul Eater appears, so all the heroes try to hurt him using electricity magic. However, the Soul Eater manages to resist all of its attacks, so Nami asks Foe to use his wind magic, and in doing so She manages to hurt the Soul Eater, so he gets angry and attacks the heroes. However, Nami and the girls manage to stay standing thanks to the legendary shield, and their Nami decides to use the Shield of Rage to defeat the Soul Eater, and by doing so he awakens a new power thanks to the zombie dragon fragment. And on the other hand, Foe transforms because she also consumed the purple crystal, so in that the boys begin to have the advantage of the fight, and at that moment Nami uses a new ability called Iron Maiden, with which he locks the Soul Eater in a prison of shields, and then he uses an Iron Maiden to finish off the Soul Eater once and for all. So upon seeing this, the other heroes are amazed at the power of Nami, and after a while we see how the wave has not yet disappeared, and at that moment a mysterious girl named Glass appears, which recognizes Nami is the only hero of the kingdom, and there she presents herself as his enemy, and then Glass decides to fight Nami, so there she tells him that now the real battle of the waves begins, and at that moment we see how the three heroes try to attack Glass. However, she stops his attacks with ease, and after this Glass uses a skill with which he knocks out the three heroes, leaving only Nami and the girls standing. So at that point he begins to fight Glass alongside Raelia and Foe. However, Glass proves to be far superior, which causes Raelia and Foe to fall to the ground defeated, so their Nami decides to activate his anger shield, so Foe gets up and attacks Glass with the power of the dragon crystal. But then Glass stops her and knocks her out again, and then she uses a special attack against Nami, which he manages to stop thanks to his shield. So Glass congratulates Nami for having endured his attack, and then that Nami decides to use the Iron Maiden, but by locking Glass she destroys the maid with great ease. So Ami decides to create a strategy to escape with the girls, and in that we see how Glass decides to allow them to escape since the time of the wave is over. So there she tells Nami that next time he will not be saved, and after this we see how the wave ends, which makes Nami wonder what the Olas really are. But then a soldier appears asking him to appear before the king. So after this Nami meets with Alt, who asks him where he got so much power to defeat a boss alone, to which Nami responds by telling him that if he wants to know, he must need before him, which causes Alt to get angry with Nami. However, he tells him that he now has the strength to kill him easily, so Nami decides to leave the throne room, and their Alt tells him that then Raelia and Foe will pay for their lack of respect, but then Nami threatens him, saying that if he does anything to them, he will kill him, so Alt is forced to remain silent. And after this Nami meets with the girls in her hard store, since he must prepare to travel to another kingdom and be able to upgrade his class, and after this the boys embark on their new journey, where we see how Erhardt left several gift accessories for everyone, which will help you move forward more efficiently. And after this the boys decide to rest, but at that moment Melty appears with several royal soldiers, and there she asks Nami to return to reconcile with King Alt, to which Nami responds by refusing, and at that moment Nami notices how a soldier tries to kill Melty, so he decides to protect her, and there it is revealed to us that all this is a conspiracy made by Main, so that everyone thinks that Nami has taken Melty hostage, since Main plans to take the throne after killing Melty using a false story. So in that Nami decides to protect Melty, and after this we see how throughout Melark they show a false video where it is shown how Nami and the girls murder Melly's bodyguards in order to kidnap the princess, which means that the boys are now wanted throughout the kingdom. So after a few days Melty mentions that she will return to the capital to talk to her father. However, Nami tells her that if she returns she will be killed, so he suggests that she travel with them, since this way Nami will be able to protect her. So Mui accepts, and in that Nami decides to travel to another kingdom called Svelte in order to find a refuge, and after walking for a while the boys decide to rest, and their Melty asks Nami why he hates King Al so much, to which Nami responds by telling him what he has experienced since he came into this world, and upon hearing this Melty mentions that his mother asked Alt to treat him well, so she is surprised to hear the treatment Nami has received from Alt, and then the conversation is interrupted when Nami notices that there are soldiers around, so he decides to continue walking secretly with the girls, but along the way Melty trips and causes noise, which causes them to be discovered by Melark soldiers, so the boys try to escape, but then they come to a cliff, and at that moment the three heroes appear accompanied by Main, which lies saying that Nami brainwashed Melty, this being the reason why she is now on his side, and there the heroes decide to believe him, so they begin to fight against Nami and his allies, and in that Nami decides to use the Shield of Anger, with which he manages to create a rift between his group and the other heroes, which means that they cannot reach the boys. But before leaving, Nami talks to Ren, and there he tells him that he should be able to understand why all this has happened, which makes Ren think about Naofumi's words, and after this Nami and the girls take refuge in a safe place in the forest, and at that moment a special Melty escort named Shadow appears, who tells Nami that he must go see the Queen of Melamar, which is located in the ice opposite direction to the Sylph Felt Kingdom, so Nami begins to doubt, and on the other hand we see how Main gathers several soldiers and magicians in the forest so that they light a mountain and thus try to make Nami and the others leave, and their Nami notices the fire, so he decides to continue advancing with the girls before the fire reaches them. And then the next day Nami goes to buy supplies and gather information, and there he finds out that they closed the checkpoints and there are patrols at the borders, this being the reason why it will now be difficult to go to Selt. And upon learning this, Nami meets with the girls to talk to them about what he heard, and there he decides to go see the Queen of Melamar, and after advancing a little the boys arrive at an area where many Dem humans live, which makes Melty remember that she has a noble friend in this region. So she tells the boys that he can help them, but then Rafia begins to remember her village, which was invaded by several rebel soldiers after the first wave, so there Melty realizes all the corruption that exists in her kingdom, this being the reason why you begin to feel bad for not having done anything. But at that moment a nobleman named Van appears, which turns out to be Melty's noble friend, so he invites the boys to talk at his mansion. And once there Van finds out the true current situation of the boys, since he heard that Nami burned the mountain to escape, so there Nami realizes that Main blamed him again for something he didn't do. And after this man orders to bring food for the boys, so the girls get excited when they see this. However, Nami tells them that the food could be poisoned, so their Van decides to try a bite of Naofumi's food so that he can trust him, and upon witnessing this the boys decide to eat, and then they start talking, and their Van mentions to Melty that traveling with Nami has made him change for the better, since before I always tried to act like a responsible adult, so Melty is embarrassed to hear this. And then Van sends the boys to the room, and their Melty asks Nami why he doesn't rest, to which he responds by saying that they could be attacked at any time. And at that moment Rafia tells him that she will watch in his place, to which Nami accepts and decides to go to bed and rest, so Melty gets angry when she sees that Nami still doesn't completely trust her, and their foe asks Melty to accompany her to explore the mansion, to which she accepts. And on the other hand Rafia asks Nami to treat Melty kindly. However, Nami decides to ignore her and continue sleeping, and then at night we see how Nami wakes up, and there he meets Melty, who tells him he doesn't know if he should just be running away, since being part of royalty she still has many things to do. But then NEY tells him that right now the priority is to escape, so she can think later about what she should do. However, Melty still continues to feel bad for not being able to do anything for her kingdom, so Nami asks him to rest a little, and there he tells her that he is sure that there is something that only she can do, so Melty decides to thank him. And after this Nami notices how Rafia still continues to have nightmares about her past, so there he realizes that he hasn't gotten over it yet. And then the next day Rafia wakes up from her nightmare, and their Naofumi mentions that they are in trouble since several soldiers are taking Van, and just then Van's servant appears in the room, and there he tells them that a nobleman from the neighboring city accused Van of helping Nami, this being the reason why they are taking him away. And then the maid decides to hide Nami and Rafia in the kitchen in order to prevent the soldiers from discovering them, and at that moment Melty appears to talk to the soldiers, which reveal being at the service of a nobleman called Idol, which is about the man who enslaved and tortured Rafia when she was little, this being the reason why Rafia gets angry. But at that point Nami stops her to avoid being discovered, and their Melty decides to cover up Nami, so she goes to Idol's mansion to prepare her trip to the capital, which allows Nami and Rafia not to be discovered. And after this they meet Foe, which was hidden by Melty so that it would not be discovered, so at that moment Nami decides to trust Melty and go save her. And then at night we see how the boys infiltrate Idol's big mansion, so at that point they begin to defeat several of their bodyguards. And along the way Rafia begins to remember several moments from her past, but still she decides to keep moving forward. And after this the boys manage to find Melty and Van, so Idol tries to threaten them with killing Melty. However, Nami saves her with great ease, so Idol gets angry at them and threatens to kill them. But then Rafia decides to face Idol on her own, and seeing that he can't beat her, Idol begins to beg for his life, which makes Rafia remember the demi-humans who also asked him for mercy, so she gets even angrier. And in that Idol remembers that Rafia comes from the town of demi-humans that he invaded, so he tells her that if he hadn't bought them they would have died of hunger. However, Rafia asks him to remain silent, since she still hasn't forgotten all the torture she received, so their Idol decides to kneel to ask Raylia for forgiveness. However, she begins to be blinded by hate, so Nami decides to intervene. And there she asks Raylia if killing Idol will help her get over her pasts, and after this he tells her that she not only became strong as a swordsman. So upon hearing these words Rafia comes to her senses, and there Rafia tells Idol that if she kills him she will become a coward like him, so she decides to spare his life so that he can live it by paying for his crimes. But then Idol gets angry when he feels humiliated by a demon, which makes him decide to attack Rafia dirtily, so she starts to defend herself, and then Idol accidentally trips over one of his weapons, which causes him to fall into the cliff from his window, so there Nami tells Rafia that is not her fault, and after this Melty decides to cure Van, which mentions that they should run away right now, but before that the boys decide to go to Idol's basement since there were the semi-human slaves that he tortured, and then the boys decide to go in there, and at that moment Rafia begins to remember her past, where we see how she decides to be positive after the death of her parents, since this way you can encourage the villagers to rebuild their town after the first wave. So at that Rafia gives a speech to everyone so that your town can once again be as prosperous as before, and there one of her friends named Keel decides to support her, and in that Raffle's best friend named Rafa also supports her idea, which causes everyone to be encouraged to rebuild the town, and after this everyone notices how several soldiers approach them, which makes the villagers think that this is help from the king. However, these turn out to be Idol soldiers which appear to capture all the demi-humans and use them as slaves, and after this Rafia is locked in the basement with Rana, where they begin to be tortured daily by Idol. However, Rafia decides not to lose faith, so she mentions to Rafa that the shield hero will come to save them one day, and there Rafia notices how Rafa begins to get sick after so much torture, but still she tries to encourage her to continue fighting, so Rafia gives him a small flag made of waste from the cell, which represents the flag that belonged to the people of both. So Rana is happy to receive this, but one day we see how a soldier looks for Rafia since she has been sold to the slave trader Baka, so Rafia begins to ask the soldier what will happen to Rafa. However, the soldier ignores her and sends her out of the mansion, and after this we return to the present, where Van reveals that there are still 3 surviving slaves, so the boys rush to go help them, and in that we see how one of them is Keel. So Rafia is glad to see that he is still alive. However, Keel cannot recognize her as she has grown so much, so Rafia reminds him of the moments they lived together in their town, which makes Keel realize that it really is Rafia, and after this Nami decides to heal K's wounds, so Keel is glad to see that the shield hero really exists, and there he mentions that Rana would have loved to meet him, and upon hearing this Rafia asks what happened to her, so Keel decides to tell him the truth, and after this we see how Rafia heads towards the cell where Rafa was, but once there she only finds Rafa's corpse, which causes Rafia to start crying, and on the other hand Melty is horrified to see what is happening inside her kingdom, and their Van tells him that this happens in more than one place in Melamar, which makes Melty a Ed, and after this Nami tells Rafia that they must give Rana a proper burial, but then Rafia begins to feel guilty because if she had been stronger, Rafa and many others would be alive. However, Nami tells Rafia that she has not done anything wrong, and there he tells her that if he hadn't met her he wouldn't have been able to trust anyone, so Rafia is surprised to hear this, and then Nami tells her that they will not allow there to be more children like her, which makes Rafia regain his will to fight. So with that Rafia decides to say goodbye to Rafa officially, and after this the boys leave Idol's basement in order to escape from the mansion, but at that moment it is revealed to us that Idol is still alive, and there he activates a monument that keeps a monster sealed inside, and at that Idol and does the seal since he wants to take revenge on Nami and Rafia, and at that moment we see how an ancient dragon called Tyrant appears, which crushes Idol with a single stomp, and after this the Tyrant begins to cause a great disaster throughout the mansion, so the boys decide to hide in a safe place with the demi-humans. And then Nami begins to wonder what they should do now, but then the Tyrant appears in front of them, which makes Nami surprised that he found them so quickly, and then he realizes that if the Tyrant attacks them they will be lost, but at that moment Foe quickly approaches the Tyrant to attack him, and there Nami decides to prepare to fight, which makes Melty mention that it will endanger all the inhabitants of the area, to which Nami responds by telling him that he plans to take the Tyrant out of the city, and at that moment Melty notices that Foe and the Tyrant's stomach are glowing, so there she tells him that it is possible that the Tyrant is following Foe, which would allow them to take the Tyrant out of the city using Foe as bait, and there Nami realizes that he still has to take care of the semi-human children, but in that Van asks him not to worry since he will be in charge of fleeing with the children, which causes Rafia to be sad at having to separate from Keel again, but then Keel tells her that she is now the companion of the shield heroes, so she must be with him, and there Keel tells him that he will be fine with Van, so Rafia agrees to go with Nami, but before leaving she gives Keel the bracelet that Nami gave her so that he can be protected, and after this Nami, Rafia and Melty get on Foe, and their Foe begins to lure the Tyrant out of the city, and along the way Rafia apologizes to Nami for having given up his bracelet, to which Nami responds by telling him that that bracelet is his so she can do whatever she wants with him, and after this we see how Foe manages to leave the city and reach a forest which begins to cross at high speed, and upon leaving the forest the boys arrive at a huge lake, so the boys decide to face the Tyrant in that place, and their Nami uses his air shield to stop him. However, the Tyrant destroys it with great ease, which makes Nami amazed, and on the other hand Foe and Rafia try to hurt the tyrant, but in that he manages to resist all their attacks easily, which puts kids at a disadvantage, so Nami decides to use the anger shield. However, a mysterious voice appears asking him not to use that shield since it should not depend on that power, and at that moment we see how several fall appear, and there they surround the boys and the tyrant, and after this we see how the queen of the folial called Fatoria appears from the lake, which asks the boys to step back since she will take care of the tyrant, and in that we see how the tyrant tries to attack Fatoria. However, she stops him without any problem, and there the tyrant tries to kill her using his fire breath, but in that Fatoria stops him easily, and after this she kills the tyrant with a single blow, which makes all the boys completely amazed, and after this Ftor decides to officially introduce herself to the boys, so in that she shows them her human form, and there Fatoria tells Nami that she senses something sinister coming from his shield, and then he mentions that the price for using the curse powers is very high, so she tells Nami that he shouldn't use them since one day you won't be able to control them. However, Nami tells him that he needs the anger shield to survive, so Ftor decides to end the conversation there, and after this she invites the boys to the fall area through her carriage, with which he quickly teleports them to the Holy Land of the File, and there he tells the boys that they should rest a little, so they start preparing dinner, and after this Fatoria decides to talk alone with Nami, to which he accepts, and there she asks him to explain how he ended up fighting the tyrant, to which Nami tells him that he thought he helped them because he already knew, but then Ftor mentions that she only went to see the candidate for queen, which turns out to be Fo, and there Nami decides to tell everything to Ftor, and after hearing this Ftor gets angry since she can't believe that the four heroes are fighting, and then Ftor asks him why they don't participate in the rest of the world's waves, which makes Nami surprised since he only believed that the waves occurred in the Melamar kingdom, but in that Ftor mentions that before each kingdom summoned a hero to deal with the waves. However, in Mel remark, they decided to summon the four, and their Ftor reveals that she was raised hundreds of years ago by a hero who asked him to prevent the heroes of the future from fighting among themselves, and after this he told her that if they got into a fight she had to kill them in order to summon new heroes with the correct values. Soria asks Nami to reconcile with the other heroes because if they don't fight together the world could come to an end, and in that she tells him that she won't be able to fight for the world alone, to which Nami responds by telling her that she is stronger than all the heroes, but Fatoria tells him that one day his power will not be enough, and then Ftor again insists that he reconcile with the heroes, to which Fumi refuses since he considers that it was them and the kingdom who rejected him, and then the next day we see how the boys start to eat, but at that moment Fatoria interrupts breakfast, and there she locks Melty in a wind prison to hold her hostage, and then Ftor asks Nami to promise that he will reconcile with the other heroes, to which Nami responds by telling him that he cannot do it, so she tells him that in that case he will have to summon new heroes since that is the best for the world, and there Nami tells him that if he wants to kill him then he accepts it, and that he also tells him that he will fight to survive. However, Fatoria decides to use an ability that nullifies the shield's powers, and there she asks them to show her that their group can stop the waves alone, so Fia mentions that Fo will fight her in a 1 versus 1, to which Fo accepts, so Fatoria creates a field so that no one intervenes in the fight, and in that we see how Fo equips himself with some strength gloves that Ard gave him in order to face Ftor. However, Ftor reveals that he is much more superior to her, so seeing that Fo cannot win, Nami tries to free Melty, but in that Ftor uses magic that seriously injures Nami, which prevents him from trying to get Melty out of the wind prison, and after this Ftor begins to gather magical power from the air to kill Fo, so there Nami encourages Fo not to give up, which makes Fo decide to gather magic and attack Fatoria with all his strength, and in that Fo manages to break through Fader's defense and cause her a small scratch, so Fatoria decides to end the duel, and there she feels that all this was a test for Fo, which he managed to overcome, so Ftor gives Fo a crown with which she recognizes her as her successor, and in that the crown becomes a lock, and there Ftor tells him that as he grows more locks will also grow, and after this Ftor uses one of her locks on Now Fumi's shield, which allows you to unlock new abilities, and then at night Fatoria decides to talk to Nami again, to whom he asks if he ever tried to prove his innocence, to which Nami responds by saying no, so there Nami decides to agree with Ftor, and after this Nami mentions that he will do what he can to reconcile with the heroes, and after a while Ftor decides to use her magic on Now Fumi's armor, which causes your stats to increase, and there she tells him that her magic will stop part of the corruption of the cursed shield, but still Fader asks him to avoid using it, for which Nami thanks him, which causes Fader to see the hero who raised her and Nami for a moment, and after this Fatoria teleports the boys near Melark so that Nami can solve his problems with the other heroes, and in that Fatoria asks Nami to take care of Fo, to which he accepts, so after this the boys begin their journey back to Melark, and after a while they reach the border, and there Nami decides to go to the entrance to try to talk to Ran or Ituki, but once at the entrance the boys meet Matoya, which makes Nami think that he has had bad luck, but still Nami tries to talk to Matoya, so that he can understand everything that is happening. However, Nami notices that Matoya is very upset, and there he begins to attack Nami with fury, which causes Nami not to understand what is happening to him, and in that Matoya reveals that Ituki and Ren were supposedly murdered by him, this being the reason why Matoya wants to take revenge by killing Nami, and their Nami tries to make him see reason, but Main intervenes and convinces Matoya that Nami is the enemy, and then she creates a lightning cage where Naofumi's group and Matoya's group are locked up, so at that moment both groups start fighting, and during the fight we see how Matoya uses the magic of her companions in order to create a new combined ability that he uses to attack Nami, which manages to cause a scratch to Nami despite using his shield, but in that Nami notes how he can also use a combined technique with Rafia, so he asks Rafia to activate her magic, which allows them to create a technique called a concealment shield, with which Nami manages to absorb Matoya's skill points, and after this we see how Fo uses his agility to send him flying with a single kick, and then she combines her magic power with Meltis, which allows them to create combined magic with which they take down Matoya's entire group, so Matoya is amazed to witness the strength of Naofumi's group, and after this Nami tries to convince Matoya again, but at that moment Fo feels that something bad is about to happen, so she asks Nami to use the maximum power of his shield to protect them all, to which Nami accepts, and then we see how a huge ray of magic falls on them. However, the boys manage to survive thanks to Nami, and after this we see that the cause of this attack was the Archbishop, and there he reveals that he plans to take down royalty and heroes since these have only brought problems for the kingdom, this being the reason why he decided to kill Ren and Itsuki, so Matoya realizes that Nami is innocent, and after this the Archbishop reveals that he has a legendary imitation which is capable of taking the form of the hero's legendary weapons. However, this requires a large amount of magic power to use, this being the reason why he has decided to use the believers of the church in order to use their magic, and upon witnessing this Matoya tries to attack him using a skill from his spear. However, the Archbishop stops him very easily with his magical barrier, so Mata decides to use her combined technique with her teammates, but in that the Archbishop reveals that he has not received any damage since all the believers are using their magic until they fall unconscious, so Nami begins to wonder what he should do, but at that moment we see how the Archbishop receives a surprise attack which manages to cause damage, and in that it is revealed to us that this attack was caused by Run and Nuki, who reveal Ral to the boys that they are still alive, and their Ituki mentions that they began to investigate the church since they thought I was hiding something which caused them to be taken into a trap. However, they were saved in time by Shadow, and after telling this, Run and Itsuki attacked the Archbishop, fighting together, which allows them to break his defense again and leave his weapon without magic, and then they tell him that the queen is on her way with her elite soldiers, and upon hearing this believers begin to doubt, so their Ituki asks the Archbishop to surrender right now. However, the Archbishop refuses to do so, and there he convinces the believers to continue having faith, so they continue giving their magic to the Archbishop, and upon seeing this the heroes decide to fight together to stop him. However, Nami begins to create a strategy with the girls since he does not want to fight alongside the three heroes, and there he begins to blame them for having been irresponsible heroes since these cause great problems in the kingdom, this being the reason why the Archbishop is partly right. So there the boys begin to reflect on their actions, but in that we see how the Archbishop uses the power of his weapon to attack them, so Nami uses his shield to defend them all, and after this he tells the heroes that they are equal to the Archbishop since everyone gets carried away by their own ego, but in that Nami mentions that he made a promise to Ftuz, so there he decides to fight alongside them to defeat the Archbishop, and at that moment the Archbishop uses a technique called Cathedral with which he creates a space where his strength and defense increase considerably, and then Ren and Itsuki attack the Archbishop with all their strength. However, it nullifies his techniques easily, so Fo and Rafia decide to join the fight, and there they manage to hurt the Archbishop. However, he manages to recover quickly thanks to the believers, so this time Nami decides to make a combined attack with Matoya, which allows Nami to use a fire technique against the Archbishop, but at that the Archbishop stops his attack with great ease since Naofumi's cursed attacks are weaker inside the cathedral. And after this we see how several believers begin to die after giving up all their magic, which makes the boys surprised to see how dangerous the Archbishop is, but then Nami notices that he has unlocked a new cursed ability, so he decides to use her to defeat the Archbishop, which makes the girls worry about Nami, but then he tells them that nothing happened to him last time, so there he mentions that this time he will also have control, and after this Nami activates the cursed shield, and in that we see how he tries to resist the dragon's wrath. However, he mentions that the anger he feels is also his, so in that Nami begins to remember the bad moments he has experienced, which causes it to begin to be consumed by hate, but at that moment Nami hears the girls' voices, and there he begins to remember his adventures with them, which causes Nami to regain consciousness, and in that we see how the girls are hugging Nami, which caused burns due to the anger shield, so Nami apologizes to them. And there he thanks them, and then Nami asks the other heroes for help to defeat the Archbishop, which makes them surprised, but in that they decide to work together, so everyone there begins to destroy the Archbishop's defenses more easily, which causes the Archbishop to begin to weaken, so he uses a special technique to kill all the heroes, but at that moment we see how the Queen intervenes in the fight, and there he uses his ice magic to stop the Archbishop, which allows Nami to use his new technique called blood sacrifice, and in that we see how Nami loses a lot of blood to activate his technique, which devours the Archbishop in an instant, thus ending the conflict. However, Nami falls unconscious after using the blood sacrifice, so the girls start to worry when they see Nami in that state, but at that moment we see how the Queen appears in front of them, and there she mentions that she will not let the shield hero die, and after 3 days we see how Nami wakes up in Melamar Castle, so the girls are happy to witness this, and then we see how the Queen enters the room. Then there she appears before Nami as Maya, and after this Maya decides to talk to Nami to tell him everything, so there she reveals that she was not in Melark because she went to a world meeting in which they decided how to face the waves of destruction, and there she mentions that it was agreed that each of the great kingdoms would summon a hero. However, Alt went ahead and summoned all 4 in Melark, this being the reason why Maya had to go to calm the other kings, and there Nami mentions that in another kingdom perhaps he would not have been hated, to which Maya responds confirming what she says, since in the Siltvelt kingdom the shield hero is worshipped as a god, and there Mylia mentions that Alt hates the shield heroes for this reason, since they protect a race that killed several of their relatives in the past, and after telling this Maya tells Nami that she will be in charge of clearing his name, since Melark cannot survive without the shield hero. However, Nami tells him that he does not plan to stay in this kingdom, and then he mentions that he will go where the waves appear and leave when they end, since that way Nami will be able to return to his world more quickly. So there Maya understands Naofumi's decision, and after this talk we see how Maya begins the trial of Alt in Maine, which he decides to transmit to the entire kingdom, and their Maya uses a slave seal so that they are not able to lie. So after this the villagers find out that Maine deceived everyone so that they would think that Nami was a criminal, and on the other hand Alt helped Naofumi's situation worsen. So after this trial Nami manages to prove his innocence before the entire kingdom, and after this Alt and Maine are sentenced to death. So after the trial we see how these are taken to the guillotine, and their Maine asks Matcha to save her. However, Matoya refuses to do so after being tricked by her, which makes Maine shocked, but at that moment we see how Nami decides to stop the execution, and there he himself decides to let Alt and M live with one condition, which consists of now Alt being called trash and Maine being called, to which Maya gladly accepts, since she also did not want to execute her husband and daughter, and after this Nami tells Maya that he will collaborate with Melark. However, this will also help the other kingdom, since he considers himself a hero who saves the world from the waves. And after a while we see how the boys visit the Melamark church, where you notice that now it also worships the hero of the shield, so Nami decides to go up class with the girls using the hourglass, and after this the boys meet with Maya, to whom they say that they did not have the option to choose a class, and their Maya mentions that this can happen sometimes since certain equipped items force a class upgrade to a specific one, and after this explanation Maya mentions that a banquet will be held tonight, so Nami decides to reject the invitation. However, Maya tells him that the banquet is actually a facade, since she wants to have a secret meeting with the 4 heroes. So later at night we see how the girls attend the banquet, and meanwhile Maya meets with the 4 heroes alone, and in that we see how an ally of Itsuki begins to insult Rapia for being semi-human, and then he starts insulting Nami in front of her, which causes Rapia to get angry and start a scandal at the banquet. And on the other hand, Maya talks to the boys about an island called Kalira, which has become an area where the experience obtained increases, so she recommends that the boys go to that island, since because of Maine the heroes have not been able to level up correctly, and their Maya mentions that this is a good opportunity for everyone to get along so they could share information with each other. However, the 3 heroes decide to refuse to collaborate since they consider it a waste of time, but then Maya tells them that if they continue with that attitude they will all die in the next wave, since Nami is currently the only one capable of surviving with his strength. So upon hearing this the heroes decide to share information, which allows Nami to learn several useful things, one of them being an ability to teleport to a registered location. But after talking for a while the boys argue among themselves again, which makes Nami decide to withdraw from the meeting, and after this Nami meets with Rafia, who reveals that he also caused a fight during the feast. But after this Nami decides to continue keeping the promise he made to Ftor, so he decides to trust the information that the heroes gave him. And then the next day the boys start traveling to go to the port of Melark, but along the way they decide to stop in the town of Rafia, where Rafa's remains are buried, and after this we see how the boys arrive at the port, where they meet up with the other heroes to travel to Kalir Island, and once inside the ship Nami meets 2 Adventurers named Lark and Teresa who do not believe that Nami is the hero of the shield, since they think that the shield hero is a cruel villain, so Lark treats Nami kindly, believing that he is not the hero he hates, and after this Teresa finds out that Nami is a good jeweler, so she tasks him with preparing an accessory using high-quality material, to which Nami accepts, so Teresa is happy to hear this, and after a few hours of travel we see how the boys arrive at Kaliro, where they are received by the island's manager named Havberg, who is forced to talk only with Nami since the other heroes are dizzy from having traveled by boat. And there he gives you the instructions and rules of the island, and after this Naofumi's group meets again with Lark and Tears, which propose to Nami to form an alliance to level up faster, and seeing that these seem to be strong adventurers, Nami decides to accept. Sork tells Nami that tomorrow they will meet to fight together. And after a few hours the boys decide to hunt monsters, and there they realize that even the weakest monsters grant a lot of experience, so they decide to take advantage of the situation. But after a while we see how they meet the groups of the other heroes, which begin to fight for the area in which they are leveling up, so upon witnessing this Nami decides to go to another desolate place where he begins to fight various monsters with raffia and foe, and there Nami creates some weapons made of a monster for the girls since their ancient weapons have been worn out from fighting so much. And then at night we see how the boys have obtained quality objects, so there he realizes that it is better for them to fight at night, and in that we see how Lark and Teresa appear in front of the boys since they were worried because they had not yet returned, so at that point they decide to return to the town with Lark and Teresa, and there we see how everyone begins to drink and celebrate together. And then the next day Nami gives the accessory he created to Teresa, so she is happy and pays him a large sum of money, which makes Nami amazed. And after this the boys decide to level up with Lar and Teresa, and there Nami realizes that they are very strong, so these manage to climb many levels together. And after this Nami proposes that they continue moving up the levels as a group. However, Lark tells him that they will fight separately from now on, to which Nami accepts, and after this Nami decides to take a day of rest with the girls on the beach. But then Fo tells him that she has found an island under the water, so Nami decides to go explore it using special suits. And once there they enter an ancient temple who owns an hourglass, and in that Nami finds out that in 2 days there will be a wave in Kala. So he decides to tell Maya about this, which decides to prepare for the wave that will appear in the sea, so she sends her best soldiers alongside the heroes on giant ships, and in that Nami notices how Lark and Teresa have also appeared to help, so the girls are happy to see them. And after this we see how the wave is about to begin, so everyone is transported to the battlefield where various sea creatures begin to appear, so all the soldiers throw several liquor bombs which they use to stun monsters, which allows them to hunt them more easily. And in that we see how the head of the wave appears, so there the boys realize that it is an interdimensional whale which proves to be quite strong underwater, so Nami decides to enter the sea with Fo. And there he catches the whale's attention with one of his skills, which allows him to make the whale come out of the water, so the other heroes attack the whale with their sacred weapons. However, these fail to see any damage, and at that moment Rapier attacks the whale from a long distance and causes a wound, so Nami realizes that Ralia now causes more damage than the other heroes. And on the other hand we see how several monsters invade one of the ships, so Melty uses her magic to expel them. But then she is captured by one of the monsters, which tries to drag her to the bottom of the sea. However, Lark appears and saves her, and after this he defeats the monsters that invaded the ship in one fell swoop, which makes everyone amazed to witness his strength. And there he decides to work with Nami to defeat the whale, so in that Nami once again draws the attention of the whale underwater, which allows you to bring it to the surface, and there Lark seriously injures the whale, so Fo attacks her to keep her out of the water, which allows Lark to do a combined technique with Teresa in order to kill the whale with a single attack. And after this the three heroes approach the whale's corpse to collect the loot. However, Lark sends them flying with a single attack, so Nami asks Lark for an explanation, and there he reveals that he and Teresa are heroes just like Nami. However, these belong to another world which is also attacked by the waves, and then Lark tells him that if he kills the heroes of his world can be saved. So there Nami learns the true purpose of the waves, and in that Lark decides to kill Nami. So at that moment we see how Naofumi's group begins to fight against Lark and Teresa, but after a while we see how Glass enters the battlefield, and there it is revealed to us that Lark and Teresa are allies of Glass, so Glass begins to help them in order to kill Na-Fi, and in that she combines her powers with Teresa, which uses the accessory that Nami gave her to increase her magical powers, so Nami protects the girls from the attack of the other heroes with his abilities. And after this Nami notices that Glass is afraid of his concealment shield, so at that point he decides to fight Glass alone, and there Nami asks the girls to take care of Lark and Teresa, what they accept, so Nami takes Glass to an empty ship, and there he asks her if she is also a hero of her world, to which she responds by telling him that she is the heroine of the fans. And after revealing this, Glass begins to attack Nami, but in that Nami uses the concealment shield which causes great damage to Glass, so there he asks her to leave, so that the wave ends. However, Glass tells him that the battle will not end until one of them dies, so she tries to attack Nami, which is defended using the concealment shield again, so he asks her to stop because if she continues fighting she will die, but then Lark gives Glass a potion to regain his strength which allows him to attack Nami despite using the concealment shield, so Nami decides to use the cursed shield, but then a member of Itsuki's group named Rishia intervenes in the fight, and there she sends barrels of liquor over Glass which Nami uses so that Glass is affected by the effects of liquor, so there Lark and Teresa decide to retire with Glass since the extra time of the wave is over. So they return to their world, thus ending the conflict, and after this Mayumi decides to rest for a few days in Kalaira, where he meets Rishia again, which was expelled from Mitsuki's group for a mistake she did not make, and upon understanding his situation Nami decides to ask him to join his group, to which Rishia accepts with great joy, and after this we see how Nami meets with Maya, which asks him what reward he wants for having saved them all, to which he responds by saying that he wants to become the governor of the town of Rafia, which allows him to rebuild it with the help of its inhabitants and several of his friends. So Rafia thanks you for all this, and their Nami tells him that the story of the hero of the shield field begins from now on, and after this we see how the Rafia village called Lalona begins to prosper, which allows Nami to recruit new allies for the town. So Nami is happy to witness this, and on the other hand we see how the old woman is training Rishia and Keel so that they can master a special energy called Kai, and during training the old woman realizes that Rishia has great potential, so Rishia is happy to hear this, and in that we see how Nami appears and interrupts the training, and there he tells Rishia that he can't always depend on the costume he's wearing, to which Rishia responds by telling her that the costume gives her more confidence since then no one can see if she is sad, and it allows her to try even harder, and after this it is revealed to us that there is 1 week left until the next wave appears, so there Keel asks the old woman if he can fight when that day comes, to which the old woman responds by saying no since he is not strong enough yet, so Keel asks him to train him to prepare for future waves, which makes the old woman happy to see that Keel has not lost heart, but then we see how the conversation is interrupted by bat-shaped monsters which begin to attack all of Lalona, so at that point Raelia and Foe begin to fight against the invaders to protect the villagers, and there they manage to kill all the monsters with great ease, and after this Nami decides to absorb one of the bats, and as he does so he realizes that these are familiars of a monster, which are creatures that were created by a stronger monster, so there Rafia wonders if these are monsters from a wave 2. Which Nami responds by telling him that it is not possible POS because the wave has not yet started, and at that moment he realizes that the wave countdown has stopped, and after this the boys feel the presence of a monster in the distance, which makes Nami wonder what is happening, and after this we see how the heroes are reunited by Maya, where they discover that the bats have attacked the entire kingdom of Melamar. However, no hero yet knows where they come from, and in that Maya reveals to them stop the turtle. However, they decide to reject Mai Li's request, so at that point all the heroes except for Nami leave the meeting, and once outside we see how Itsuki meets Rishia. Who do you decide to agree? And after this Itsuki leaves with his group, but then Rishia stops him and asks if she can be his partner again, to which Itsuki responds by saying no since he considers that Rishia is of no use to him in his current state, and there Rishia tries to insist with her request, but then she is stopped by one of Itsuki allies, which tells her that she is too weak and clumsy to be in his group, so upon hearing this Rishia starts to cry, so the girls come to her to comfort her, and on the other hand Nami continues talking with Maya, which mentions that the turtle has already destroyed several areas of the east, and if it continues to advance it will also destroy Naofumi's village, so there Nami decides to accept defeating the turtle spirit, for which Maya thanks him, and after this Naofumi's group visits are hard in order to improve his equipment, and their RAF Alia recommends Rishia to use a sword. However, Rishia tells him that she prefers not to use it since she thinks that she is bad at fighting with any type of weapon, and in that we see how Rafia comes up with a new idea for Rishia to become stronger, so she takes Rishia to Baka so that the slave seal is placed, since this will allow you to improve faster by being under the protection of Nami, and at that moment Nami asks Rafia to stop since he will not force anyone else to become his slave, so Rafia apologizes to Rishia, but then Rishia decides to become Naofumi's slave since she wants to get stronger, so in that we see how Baka's begins the ritual of the slave seal, and after this Rishia becomes a slave to Nami, so Nami asks Rishia if she cares that much about being accepted by Itsuki, to which she responds by saying yes, since that is why she decided to train with Nami, so Nami decides to help Rishia, and after this he asks the girls to get ready since they will soon travel east to kill the turtle spirit, and then the next day we watch as the boys begin their journey east, so along the way they meet new towns, and after several days they reach the realm closest to the turtle spirit, where they hear that several kingdoms have united to kill the creature, and then the boys hear that the 3 heroes died trying to kill the turtle, which causes Rishia to get upset, so there she decides to move forward on her own to see if Ituki is okay, but at that point Nami decides to stop her along with the other girls to calm her down, and there Nami asks Fo to communicate with Vittoria through her locks to ask if the heroes are really dead, and in doing so Ftor reveals to them that they are still alive, so there Nami asks Rishia to calm down, and after this he decides to get information within the town, but at that moment we see how more familiars of the turtle spirit appear, which begin to attack the villagers, so the boys decide to fight the monsters to protect them all, but seeing that there are many of them, Nami decides to attract them all with his ability, and there he uses a new technique called Tornado Shield with which you defeat several enemies at the same time. However, Nami notices how more monsters appear, so there he decides to use the Anger Shield, which allows him to kill everyone with a single attack, but in that we see how Nami is quite tired, so the girls decide to go help him, and at that moment we see how a mysterious woman named OST appears in front of them, and there she recognizes Nami is the hero of the shield, so OST asks Nami to kill her, which makes Nami confused, but at that moment we see how the presence of the turtle appears again, and after this the boys notice that OST has disappeared, and after a few hours, Nami attends a meeting organized by several generals who represent different kingdoms of the world, and then they begin to argue about how they should confront the turtle, and there it is revealed to us that this is in charge of attacking areas with high population, so the kings are able to deduce which city will be their next objective, and in that Nami asks the generals how they will defeat the turtle since they have no time to waste, so he mentions that they should create a plan soon, and in that we see how the generals get angry with Nami since they consider that their armies will be enough to kill the turtle. But then one of the generals mentions that they need the 4 heroes since tens of thousands of his soldiers tried to kill the turtle before, however they failed to do so, so Nami decides to collaborate with the allied army to stop this threat, and after this we see how one of the generals proposes calling the 7 astral heroes. However, another general mentions that they will not be able to come to help them since most of them are very far from this area, and in that Nami asks them who the 7 astral heroes are, and there Maya tells him that there are 7 heroes who use weapons known as vassal weapons who fight to protect the world from the waves. However, these are weaker than the 4 legendary heroes, and upon hearing this Nami begins to wonder where the astral heroes are now, but at that moment we see how OST interrupts the meeting of the allied army, and there she reveals to them that she is actually a familiar of the turtle spirit, which makes everyone surprised to hear this, and their OST mentions that his job is to gather the minimum number of souls necessary for the turtle, and not understanding anything Nami asked for a more detailed explanation, and then O tells him that the turtle uses human souls as energy in order to prevent waves from occurring, so O caused wars between 2 sides to gather the necessary souls, and if this doesn't work the turtle sends his monster familiars for these to gather souls directly around the world, and if that doesn't work either, that's when the turtle wakes up in order to gather souls on their own, devastating the world. However, this time the turtle spirit has been awakened by an unknown who is manipulating her, so that she destroys everything in her path, so their O tells them that for that reason she must stop the turtle, and in that she mentions that to defeat her they must cut her throat, and after this the generals begin to wonder who should take command, which causes a big argument between them since each one wishes to take command of the operation for their honor, so upon hearing this discussion Nami gets angry with everyone, and there he mentions that it doesn't matter who is in charge since the important thing is to create a plan that does not cause so many victims, and after mentioning this Nami decides to leave the meeting, and after a few hours Rafia meets with the girls, and there we see how the old woman and a Melark soldier named Declare meet there since both are currently working for Nami and for Laurona, so Rafia brings the girls up to date on what happened at the meeting, and after this we see how Aost appears to talk to them, and during this talk it is revealed to us that Air is in charge of training soldiers so that they can be ready to defend Laurona, so Rafia has improved with the use of the sword thanks to Air, and after this conversation we see how Rafia meets with Nami, whom he convinces to work alongside the generals of the other kingdoms since deep down they only want to protect their towns, and their Nami decides to accept Rhea's advice, so the next day Nami works with the generals in order to create a good strategy and be able to stop the turtle spirit, and after this we see how the allied army gathers all its soldiers since this way they will be able to attract the turtle when there are many people gathered together, which will allow them to stop the turtle spirit, so with that everyone begins to prepare so that the plan is a success, and then at night we see how the boys decide to rest, and there Claire mentions that before meeting them she passed through the capital, so she met her hard, which decided to send several gifts to the girls, so in that Rafia receives a new sword Foa Claw and Rishia a new costume, so all 3 manage to increase their statistics, and after this, US asks Rishia if she is with Nami to help Atsuki, to which she responds stating it with a lot of guilt, and upon noticing this Nami tells her that it was he who encouraged her to do it, so there he asks her not to be so hard on herself, and then O realizes that Rishia likes Atsuki, which causes Rishia to get nervous, so that's when O decides to give Rishia love advice so that she can conquer Atsuki, but then the conversation is interrupted by the presence of the turtle, so everyone realizes that it is close to them. So the next day, the generals decide to meet again, where they receive news that the turtle is approaching them, but there a soldier informs them that Nami has already begun to move with the army, and on the other hand, we see how Nami is about to leave to fight the turtle, but at that point he is stopped by an escort from Maya, which turns out to be Shadow, who mentions that Maya sent her to help him, so Nami accepts her into the army, and after this, Air tells Nami that they are ready to leave, and there he asks her not to die, so she asks him the same thing, and after this Air begins to advance with the army towards the turtle, and in that we see how Nami also advances with the girls, which causes the morale of all soldiers to rise, and at that moment we see how the familiars of the turtle spirit appear, so Nami decides to attract them all so that the army can reach the turtle without problems, so at that point he separates from the army along with the girls, and after this Nami activates his ability to attract the attention of family members, which causes them to begin to follow Nami and ignore the army. So that's when the army manages to reach the turtle, which they begin to attract towards a large crack since they plan to guide her into a trap. And on the other hand, Nami realizes that the plan is working, so there the boys decide to stop, and then they decide to eliminate all of the turtle's relatives, which causes Rishia to get nervous, but in that we see how O decides to use his gravity magic, with which he manages to take down most of the family members, so the boys decide to take advantage of this opportunity, so these begin to defeat the remaining enemies, and in that we see how Shadow appears before Nami, to whom he informs that the Sotter's trap has not worked, so the turtle spirit hasn't stopped, and on the other hand the soldiers begin to shoot several projectiles at the turtle in order to prevent it from continuing to advance. However, the turtle takes out half of the assault squad with ease, so their general decides to blow up the fort near the turtle, which causes the turtle to stop, so the remaining soldiers manage to approach the turtle without problems, but at that moment O begins to remember new information about the turtle, so there it is mentioning that the turtle is capable of attacking from a long distance, and in that we see how it begins to end with several soldiers shooting magical spikes. So Anumi is upset when he witnesses this, but at that moment he decides to try to cut the turtle's neck, so there he tells the girls that they should advance towards her, but before leaving Nami asks Shadow to send a message to Maya, and after this Nami begins to advance with the girls, so there Acer decides to follow him with his remaining soldiers, and on the other hand we see how Maya receives the message from Nami, which asks him to gather all the wizards of Melark so that they can use collective magic against the turtle's neck, so Maya decides to accept Naam's request, and back with Nami, he asks Aost if she is sure what she is about to do, because if they kill the turtle she will die too, to which OST responds by telling him that he doesn't care, so Nami decides to continue advancing, but then they are stopped by a rather powerful familiar of the turtle, and their O decides to stop him using his gravity magic, and then army soldiers show up to help us stop the familiar, so that Nami can continue advancing, so Nami decides to move forward with the girls, and in that we see how the family member tries to kill the soldiers. However, O protects them all using his magic, so Nami decides not to worry about them and continue moving forward, and at that moment we see how the magicians cast a powerful lightning bolt on the turtle, which causes a wound in the neck, and there the old woman tells Nami that they should not waste this opportunity, so Nami orders Rapia and Foe to attack the turtle's wound, which he accepts, and in that they both attack the turtle with all their strength, which makes it try to escape. However, Nami uses his air shield to stop her, and at that moment we see how OST appears behind Nami, and there she uses her magic to reinforce the legendary shield, which allows Nami to increase the power of his air shield, and on the other hand Rishia uses her magic to increase Rapia and Foe's strength, so that they both attack the turtle again, which allows them to decapitate her. So upon witnessing this all the soldiers begin to celebrate, and then we see how the boys are sad to know that OST has died too, so the Rishia starts crying for her, but at that moment we see how OST gives him a handkerchief to dry his tears, and there they realize that OST is still alive, so in that she reveals to them that the turtle spirit has not yet been defeated, and after this we see how the boys return to camp, and their Rishia decides to tell her story to the girls, so, and that we move to the past where it is revealed to us that Rishia comes from an impoverished noble family. And there we see how Rishia lives completely happy with her parents, but one day, we see how some guys enter Ria's house in order to take her as a slave, since his family was the target of some nobles from his neighboring town. So at that Rishi begins to spend his days inside a cell, but one day we see how Atsuki appears to save her, since he managed to expose the crimes of the nobles, and back in the present Rishia tells everyone that that's why she appreciates Atsuki so much, and then she mentions that for that reason she wants to return the favor and be of use to him, and upon hearing the story O tells Rishia that Itsuki is surely fine, so Rishia thanks him for his words, and after this we see how Nami meets with the girls since he was in a meeting with the general, so Rafia asks if they have already decided what to do with the turtle, to which Nami responds by saying yes, since tomorrow they will go on the back of the turtle spirit to explore it, and then the next day. The boys leave the camp to go to the turtle, and along the way Nami mentions that they must kill the turtle quickly because if it manages to recover then it will put more lives at risk, and then Nami mentions that on the turtle's back O could recover his memory, which is good for everyone because then they will be able to find the turtle's weakness, and after a while we see how the boys arrive at the place where the monster is, so these climb on the turtle's back, which they begin to explore because it is quite large, and along the way Rishia asks Aost if he has managed to remember anything new, to which she responds by saying no because feel like your mind is clouded, and there Rishia realizes that everything around her is covered in fog, so she notices that the environment on Torture's back is linked to S mind, and after this Nami tells the girls that they will camp there at night, which makes everyone surprised, but still they decide to follow Nami, and later at night Rishia notices how Rafia and Fo are very close, which makes them look like sisters, so Rishia begins to feel a little jealous of being an only child, and their OST asks Rishia if she doesn't miss her parents, to which she responds by saying yes. However, Rishia decided to separate from them to help them from afar, and upon mentioning this Rishia remembers how she was kicked out of Itsuki's group, which makes her sad, but then O tells him that she can help him by being an ally of Nami, so now Rishia can be useful to Itsuki, and upon hearing this Rishia begins to cry with joy, so she thanks OST for his words, and then OST begins to recover part of his memories, which causes the fog in the area to disappear, and after this OST mentions that they already know where they have to go, so, and that we see how the boys decide to follow OST, and after walking for a while they discover a town on the turtle's back, which has several corpses inside it, so the next day we see how Mile arrives at the town with several soldiers in order to collect the corpses, and after this the boys enter a temple that is in the town which is in poor condition, but still the boys decide to explore it, and there the girls find an unknown writing that comes from another world, but then Nami realizes that the writing is in Japanese, so Maya deduces that the writing was made by ancient heroes, and in that mentions that the writing talks about the seal of the turtle and how to break it, and there she reveals that she knows because she has been starting to remember more things, but before he can say anything else we see how the temple begins to collapse, so the boys are forced to retreat, which causes Nami to become frustrated, but then remembers that to defeat the turtle you have to destroy its heart, which can be reached through a secret entrance, so there Nami decides to enter, and that he asks the old woman Maya, Air, and Rishia to return to the camp, but upon hearing this Rishia tells Nami that she will go with him, so upon noticing her determination Nami decides to accept her, and after this the boys enter the turtle's body through the secret entrance, where we see how Rishia is scared, but in that O thanks him for having decided to go with them, which makes Rish calm down a little, and then Nami notices that there are people inside the turtle's body, so this one gets on guard, and at that moment we see how an adventurer appears and attacks him. However, Nami manages to stop his attack easily, and then Raylia decides to illuminate the area with her magic of light, so Nami realizes that they are 3 ordinary adventurers which were supposedly sent by Maya to explore the area, but upon seeing Nami they decide to retire and leave the rest to him. However, Nami stops them, and there he orders Rapia to use her anti-sea concealment magic, which makes the 3 adventurers show their true appearances, and in that it is revealed to us that these are actually Lark, Teresa, and Glass, so Nami begins to wonder what they are doing there, and their Lark asks Nami not to worry about them since they don't plan to fight him, and then Lark reveals that they have come to finish off the one who broke the turtle's seal, since this person comes from the same world as Lark, Teresa, and Glass, and in that Glass mentions that the person who broke the seal wants to gain power, this being the reason why he is using the guardian beasts from other worlds, and their Lark mentions that this guy does what he wants for his own benefit, so his actions will also bring destruction to his world, and after this Lark proposes to Nami to make a truce and collaborate. However, Nami immediately rejects his proposal since he does not want to collaborate with future enemies, and in that Nami tells them that they can do whatever they want since he currently does not consider them enemies, so Lark accepts Naofumi's decision, so he decides to move forward alone with Teresa and Glass, and after this Nami continues advancing with the girls, and there begins to remember the path more easily, which makes Fo wonder what path Lark and the others have taken, and after a while we see how the boys find a blue hourglass, which is sand that has already fallen, so there the boys realize that this has no relationship with the waves, and their O tells them that that clock symbolizes the number of souls that the turtle has accumulated, and then he mentions that when it is full a barrier will be created which will protect the world from the wave, and then Nami asks OST if that watch is the heart they are looking for, to which OST responds by saying no, since she just wanted to check how much energy the soul turtle has received, and after this O decides to take the boys to the heart of the turtle, and on the other hand we see how Lark and the others are fleeing from several relatives, so their Lark realizes that they are going on the right path, and after running for a while they manage to find the turtle's heart, so that they decide to destroy it, and back with Nami we see how he continues to advance with the girls, and their Rishia realizes that it is not feeling well since she feels bad for having sacrificed so many souls for the turtle, which makes her wonder what she should really protect, and at that moment Rishia asks O not to carry everything alone since she is currently part of Naofumi's group, and in that we see how Rafia tells him she thinks the same as Rishia, so there she gives all her support to Austin. After this Nami finds a way out of the turtle's interior, so he asks OST if they should return and take another path, to which O tells him that it will not be necessary, and in that she opens a path between one of the walls, and after this AUS mentions that if they continue on that path they will reach the heart, so the boys decide to move forward, and after a while they reach the heart, where they are greeted by the person who broke the turtle seal, which turns out to be the bearer of the vassal book called Kyle. So then OST attacks him using his magic. However, he reveals that his real body is not there, and after this Kyle mentions to Nami that he has deceived Lark since he is destroying fake hearts in another part of the turtle's interior, this being the reason why the boys did not meet the heroes of the other world, and in that Nami demands that Kyo stop controlling the turtle spirit. However, Kyo immediately rejects his request, and there Kyo tells Nami that in his world it is easier to control the guardian beast, since the world where he comes from it is more difficult to do this, being the reason why Kyo has decided to come to Naofumi's world, and in that it mentions that the fate of this world will be decided by the legendary heroes, so there she tells Kyo that he must return to the turtle spirit, but at that moment we see how the heart's defense system is activated, so this one start attacking the boys, which means that Nami must protect the girls, and after this foe attacks the turtle's heart, and then OST starts to feel pain, which makes the girls worry about her. However, OST asks them not to stop, so Raylia decides to destroy the heart with a single attack, and in that O manages to recover all his memories, so she starts crying after this. And in that we see OST is still alive, so Nami realizes that having destroyed the heart was not enough either, but then OST mentions that he already knows how to destroy the turtle, and in that moment she creates a new path, and their OST asks the boys to come in there, what they accept, and on the other hand we see how the turtle's head regenerates, so she begins to threaten all the soldiers present, who decide to wait for Nami to destroy the turtle from within, and back with Nami we see how he reaches the core of the turtle, where they are received by the real Kyle, and there it is revealed to us that OST is actually the turtle spirit, so Kyle mentions that they could have avoided many deaths if they killed her first, and in that we see how the head and heart of the turtle regenerate again, which causes the core to now be protected by a barrier which can only be destroyed if you destroy the head and the heart at the same time, and then Kyo reveals that he has kidnapped the three heroes, which he uses as a source of power, so the boys are surprised to see this, and in a change of scene we see how the turtle tries to destroy the allied army. However, Fatoria appears to protect them, and there she begins to fight against the turtle to help Nami, and on the other hand we see how Teresa and Glass reach the core, so there they decide to fight against Kyo to stop his plans, and then Kyo uses his vassal weapon to attack them all with his powers, so Rafia and Foe try to counterattack. However, Kyo manages to defend himself with a special barrier made from the power of the heroes. And after this Kyo uses a gravity technique with which he knocks down all the boys, but at that moment Rishia stands up thanks to his Kai handling, and there she decides to fight Kyo to save them all, which gives Austin Nami time to use their magic so that everyone can free themselves from Kyo's gravity power, and after this O creates a path to the turtle's heart so that Lark, Teresa, Glass, and Foe can go destroy it, and on the other hand Rishia manages to break the prison that imprison the three heroes, which makes Kyo angry, so there he tries to kill her with powerful magic from his book. However, Rishia stops her with great ease, which makes everyone surprised, and on the other hand we see how Fatoria manages to destroy the turtle's neck, so at that Foe gives that to Glass and Teresa, which use their powers to destroy the heart, and at that moment OST activates a power that he left inside Naofumi's shield, which allows Nami to use the shield of the turtle spirit with which it destroys the nucleus. So upon witnessing this, Kyo decides to return to his world, and their Lark and the girls decide to go after him to capture him, and on the other hand OST uses his power to make Nami travel to other worlds, so Nami and the girls decide to say goodbye to OST, which is glad to have been in Naofumi's group before dying with the turtle, and after this Nami, Rafia, Foe, and Rishia travel to the world of Lark and the others, and then we see how Nami, Rishia, and Rafia wake up in a cell, and there they realize that they are now level 1, so Rafia is a girl again, and after this they realize that Foe is not with them, so the boys decide to get out of the prison they are in order to find Foe, and in doing so they are transported to an island where they decide to level up against weak monsters, since with their current level they will not be able to face the threats of the new world. And after a few hours the boys meet a Kappa, which has a higher level than them, so their Nami tries to protect the girls using his body as a shield, but at that moment the Kappa is defeated by a girl named Kazuna, which reveals to be the heroine of the sacred weapon of the hunt. And there she decides to take the boys to the cells again in order to treat Naofumi's wounds, and once there Kazuna reveals that they are in the infinite labyrinth, which is a temporary prison from which it is impossible to escape, which makes the boys surprised, and after this Kazuna reveals to the boys that she is Glass's best friend, so she's glad to hear that you're okay, and then Kazuna invites the boys to eat. However, Nami tells her that he still doesn't trust her, and then Kazuna reveals that she cannot attack any human with her sacred weapon, so there she asks him to trust her because she can't hurt them, to which Nami accepts, and then the next day Kazuna gives the boys a tour of the prison, and there she reveals that she has been locked up there for many years since Kazuna has not been able to find a way out, and then Kazuna takes the boys to a small bug on the edge of the prison, since that is the furthest place he has been able to reach, and upon seeing this Nami decides to use the bug to his advantage, and there Nami creates a bioplant seed with Kazuna, which is used in the bug in order to expand the arrow zone and create a crack in space which allows everyone to escape the infinite labyrinth, so that the boys are sent to the new world. So Kazuna is glad to be able to be in the outside world again, which causes her to hug the boys while thanking them for helping her, and after this Kazuna suggests that the boys go to the Sickle Kingdom, since there they venerate her as a heroine because they invoked her. However, Nami finds out that it will take a long time to get there, so there they decide to go to the capital called Mick, since there they can use the hourglass to teleport to another kingdom. So the boys agree to go to Mick, and once there they realize that this world is similar to feudal Japan, and then Kazuna mentions that they must earn money soon since she doesn't have much money, so in that Nami decides to sell the products of his world which he was able to collect thanks to the shield. So the next day we see how he begins to sell the products on the street, and there they manage to save a lot of money. So after this, Nami decides to hold an auction of his products, since this has gained a lot of fame within the capital, and thanks to the auction the boys manage to earn enough money which allows them to buy good weapons and armor for everyone, and after this Kazuna buys a travel permit in order not to have problems when passing through the checkpoints, and then the boys start walking around the city, and then they watch as a genius sorcerer named Kazu is praised by the villagers since he developed a more effective method of teleportation, and in that Nami notices that it is snowing, so he decides to look for a place to stay for now, and once there they decide to infiltrate the place where they have the hourglass in order not to endanger Kazuna, since it was the same Ma Kingdom that locked her in the infinite labyrinth. So with that the boys infiltrate the castle where the clock is, but once there Kazuna realizes that the clock is not there, so they fell into a trap, and there the boys begin to fight against several soldiers until they find the clock, which is protected by Kazu, who reveals to be Kyo's partner, and in that Kazuna manages to reach the clock to teleport with the boys. However, teleportation in Rafia is cancelled, and there it is revealed to us that this was planned by Kyo since he wants to see how Nami suffers when separated from Rafia, and there Nami asks Kazuna to cancel the teleportation. However, Kazuna tells him that once activated it cannot be cancelled, so in that everyone except Raylia is transported to Sickle, and there Nami asks Kazuna to take them back to Mika, but then Kazuna mentions that the capital's clock has been closed, so these will not be able to return. And then the next day Kazuna takes the boys to a friend of his named Ethno, who is the bearer of the ship's vassal weapon, and there Kazuna reveals that he specializes in searching for people, and in that Ethno decides to create a familiar for him using a trait from Rafia, so Nami uses Rafia hair to create his familiar, and at that Ethno begins the ceremony, and after this we see how Naofumi's family member is born, and there Kazuna mentions that if Rafia dies the family member does too, so at that point the boys realize that Rafia is still alive, which makes Nami calm down, and after this Ethno takes the boys to a forest in Sickle where he summons his ship's vassal weapon, and once there we see how Naofumi's relative discovers the location of Rafia, so Ethno decides to take the boys to the place where she is. Then their Ethno leaves them in a safe area of me so as not to be discovered, so the boys thank him for his help, and then they start exploring the city, but at that moment Nami feels Foe's presence, so he starts looking for her, and in that Nami discovers that Foe has been captured as a slave in order to be used to attract new viewers, so upon witnessing this Mayumi gets angry, and there he tries to kill the merchant who captured Foe, but then Rishia stops him and tells him that the best thing would be to save her at night, because if it causes a scandal everyone could be hurt, so Nami decided to calm down, and then at night we see how the boys infiltrate the merchant's store in order to find Foe, and there Nami notices that she has become a chick since in this world there are no files, and in that Nami frees Foe from his cage, and then he tortures the merchant who captured Foe as revenge, and After this, we see how the boys spend the night in the forest, where we see how Fo decides not to leave Nami, so Nami tells her that he will not leave her alone again, and then the next day the boys decide to continue looking for Rafia, but their Nam notices that Raffles' slave seal has disappeared, so he realizes that something strange is happening, and at that moment we moved several days ago, where we see how Rafia is sent to a place called the Shrinking Prison, and there she begins to remember Nami, but in that Rafia decides not to give up until she sees him again, and after this Rafia is locked in a special cell which absorbs its energy, and then she realizes that inside the cell are Lark, Teresa, and Glass. They fail to recognize her because she looks like a girl, but after talking to her they realize that it is Rafia, so Lark is happy to see her, and in that Rafia reminds him that they are still enemies, but there she mentions that the truce between them still stands, so he proposes that they work together to escape from prison, what they accept, and then Lark reveals that they fell into Kyo's trap upon returning to their world, this being the reason why they are locked up in prison, and after this Rafia tells them what she experienced since she came into this world, so that the boys find out that Kazuna was locked in the infinite labyrinth, so they are happy to find out that she was able to escape, and their Glass decides to help Rafia, so that he can meet Nami, so at that point the boys talk to Rafia about the shrinking prison, which increases the strength of the guards through talisman, and their Rafia comes up with an idea to escape, and in that she tricks one of the guards using her illusion magic for him to enter their cell, and once their Rafia steals his talisman to give it to Glass, which allows Glass to regain his strength in order to destroy the wall of his cell and be able to escape, and once outside Lark mentions that they must meet with Kazuna and Nami, however they must pass through the city of Mick to reach CLL, and there Teresa tells Raylia that they will advance while fighting monsters so that Rafia can level up, and then she decides to sell her jewelry, so she can buy food and armor, which allows them to fight various monsters along the way, and after this the boys learn that a new wielder of the vassal katana has appeared, so Lark suggests that they go and see who will be the new bearer, and once their Rafia realizes that it is Kazu who tries to take the vassal katana, however she rejects him, and then chooses Rafia as her carrier, which causes Naofumi's slave seal to disappear, and their Kazu orders Rafia to be captured for stealing the katana, and on the other hand Rafia realizes that she cannot let go of the vassal katana, so she decides to escape without Lark and the others so as not to put them in danger, and meanwhile Raylia begins to grow, after becoming the wielder of the katana, which causes it to begin to move with difficulty as it does not get used to the change, but still she manages to reach a temple where she meets a priestess who decides to help her since his family has served the katana hero for generations, so she gives Rafia new clothes, and then Rafia realizes that Kazu has arrived at the temple, so she decides to go out to face him, but before doing so she thanks the priestess for helping her, which causes the priestess to feel honored by her words, and once outside Rafia meets Kazu and his subordinates, and their Kazu demands that he return the vassal katana since he believes he is the real bearer of the weapon. However, Rafia decides to refuse to give it to him, and then Kazu summons some sacred beasts called by AKO to kill Raylia, however she kills them with ease, and after this Rafia gives Kazu a special cut, and there he tells him that if he moves he will be cut in two, which causes Kazu to be forced to remain still, so that his subordinates can try to cure him from Raffles' attack, and their Rafia tries to escape from the temple with the little strength she has left, but then she meets a third Bio who tries to kill her, and finding herself very weak, Rafia decides to accept her fate and die. However, Nami appears to save her along with the other girls, and then we see how Kazuna uses his sacred weapon to kill by AKO with a single blow, which allows the girls to meet Raylia again, which is happy to meet everyone again, and after this Rafia hugs Nami while telling him that he is back, so this welcomes him, and then we see how Lark and the girls meet Kazuna again, so they decide to return to Sickle, and on the other hand we see how Kazu is still motionless inside the temple, and then Kyo appears in front of him to provoke him, so Kazu gets angry and moves, which causes it to be cut in two, so the subordinates are shocked after witnessing this, and their cow decides to use Kazu's corpse for his plans, and after this he asks his childhood friend named Yogi for help so that he can murder Nami and the others, and back with Nami we see how they return to Sickle thanks to Ethno, and once their Kazuna finds out that his friends tried to kill Nami since she still doesn't know anything about the waves, but in that Kazuna proposes to Nami to form an alliance in order to discover another way to stop the waves and save both worlds, to which Nami accepts, and after this it is revealed to us that Lark is the king of Sickle, so everyone is surprised to find out about this, and later we see how Kazuna takes the boys to a blacksmith named Ramana, who is in charge of creating weapons and armor for everyone, and just then the boys hear a big scandal outside, so these decide to leave, and there they meet Yogi, which prepares to fight alone against all of the heroes, so Naofumi's group gets the advantage of the fight from the beginning. But then the boys notice that Yoga's sword acts strangely, so Kazuna tells Yogi that he should let her go. However, Yogi decides to ignore her, and that the boys decide to fight together to separate Yogi from his sword, which turned out to be a bomb made by Kyo to kill the Hero. So the Yogi realizes that Kyo used her without caring about her, and after this Kazuna decides to talk to Yogi alone, which tells him about Kyo, so that she tells him that Kyo's goal is to stop the waves. So Kazuna decides to go talk to Kyo personally to resolve this conflict, which causes Yogi to thank him. And then the next day the boys receive the armor made by Ramayana, which causes them to raise their statistics, but in that we see how a wave suddenly appears in the world, and there Yogi learns that Kyo did not plan to stop the waves but rather calls them, and in that Kazuna decides to fight in the wave with Lark, Teresa, and Glass, and on the other hand Ethno takes Nami and the girls with Kyo in order to defeat him and be able to stop the wave of disaster, and then they arrive at Kyle's laboratory, but after advancing a little they are stopped by Kazu's subordinates, which were turned into Chimas by Kyle to become stronger since they were deceived by Kyle. So there Rafia decides to knock them out using his katana, and then we see how Kyo introduces himself to the boys, and there he reveals that he turned Kazu into a homunculus, which now possesses the spirit of the vassal mirror hero. So their Kazu's subordinates find out that he is already dead, which makes them sad, and their Raft Tail IA asks Nami and Rishia to take care of Chaos and Sheep Foe, and Yogi will be in charge of fighting Kazu, to which Nami accepts, and after this he meets Kyo, which begins to provoke Nami, which causes Nami to get angry and invoke the Shield of Rage, so this one starts to lose control, and at that Rishia tries to make Nami stop, so she reminds him that he is not alone, and after this Rishia decides to fight Kyo to give Nami time to recover, and meanwhile we see how Nami has an internal struggle where is about to succumb to hate, but at that moment OST appears to help him regain consciousness, and then we see how Rafia and Foe appear next to Nami to help him, so Nami manages to recover, and in that he invokes the shield of the turtle spirit in order to defeat Kyo by shooting him with lightning, and in that Nami increases his power thanks to the girls and the spirit of OST, which allows him to finish off Kyo and stop the wave that he caused, and after this Spirit decides to say goodbye to the boys, and then Nami meets with the heroes of the other world to celebrate. However, he notices how he is about to return to his world, so Nami and the girls decide to say goodbye to Kazuna and the others, and once back Nami finds out that the three heroes stopped the way from their world, and then Nami is named Six Count for having STO the turtle, so after this Nami decides to return to La Rona with the girls, and so the anime ends.